is often found in the brains of deceased athletes, military veterans, and others with a history of repetitive brain trauma. Hundreds have donated their brains to the VA Boston University Concussion Legacy Foundation Brain Bank.
This is a former NFL player who died in his early 70s, and this is a veteran who also died in his early 70s.
Dr. Ann McKee dissects these brains.
The hippocampus and the mammillary bodies are very important for memory. I can see that they're slightly affected.
McKee recently dissected the brain of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murder and later committed suicide.
You'll see right away that the brain is showing signs of shrinkage. You can see the crevices in the brain that you can't see in the normal.
McKee says Hernandez's severe case of CTE impacted his decision-making, depression, and ability to control rage and aggression. Right now, she thinks we're underestimating how many people have CTE.
We were able to distinguish between CTE and controls and CTE and Alzheimer's disease. The next question is, can we do this in the blood, and can we do this in living people? And we aren't there yet with those answers.
But the need for a diagnosis in the living is motivating companies such as Quanterix in Lexington, Massachusetts, to work faster on technology that could diagnose concussions and CTE in as few as 30 minutes. Kevin Rosovsky is the CEO.
It's like a high-powered microscope. And so by doing that, we can see little biomarkers that you couldn't see before in the blood.
Quanterix received a grant from the NFL and just went public. Since then, its stock is up more than 40%. The company sells a machine called Simoa for $175,000 to other biotechs, hospitals, and researchers.
And for the first time in history, we're able to see brain health in blood, and that's a major breakthrough, and that's leading to less invasive testing, and we've already been able to see evidence of concussions, and there's the beginning evidence of being able to see the accumulated effect of concussions.
Quanterix is also trying to detect Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. Rosovsky says he thinks diagnosing concussions will be easier than diagnosing CTE.
Diagnosing CTE in the living probably is a couple years away. We're real excited to see the progress, but reducing some of that work into actual tests in a laboratory takes time. There's regulatory approvals. There's a lot of red tape that you have to go through.
Also in this race to diagnose CTE in the blood are Athlon Medical and Exosome Sciences. And New York's Mount Sinai Hospital is scanning for the disease in the living. But it's just one step in a series of questions for those with serious head trauma. There's still no cure for CTE.
Even if we had a great idea for a treatment, there's no way to test whether it's effective or not. So that's the enormous advance that we'll get if we can develop a biomarker for this disease.
In Boston, Ann Mostu, Bloomberg News.
Wine is a $300 billion global industry where one person's opinion can make fortunes or break them. That's because of this man, Robert Parker, and his newsletter, The Wine Advocate. For 3 decades, he dominated as the world's most influential wine critic. Now Parker's protege is building an empire of his own. Antonio Galloni runs Venice. Antonio, tell me, what are you trying to build at Venice?
Well, at Venice, we started with the idea in 2013 of building a world-class platform. We have a database of about 250,000 professionally written reviews. On Delectable, we have 7 million user reviews. Through Delectable, we also have a partnership with Whole Foods and several other partnerships that we can't announce just yet. And when you put that all together, what we have is something that no other company in our space can even come close to.
Do you think of yourself as the next Parker?
Not at all.
Why?
Because Steve Jobs said you can't live your life trying to be somebody else. So he's one of my biggest influences, and I've never wanted to be a replica of somebody else because a replica is never as good as the original. Bob is a genius, fantastic, one of a kind. We're going to be something completely different, and I have no desire to be some version of somebody else.
Different in what way?
Every decision that I've made at this company is completely anathemic to what Bob.
Okay, position closed and 118617. Okay, I closed euro at 118617. Okay.
Most experienced active wine critic in America wants to work with us. That says something. When Alessandro Masnaghetti, who's the best cartographer of vineyards, wants to work with us, that says something. When Neil Martin, who's a superstar wine critic with enormous experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy and the former lead critic at The Advocate, wants to come and be part of our team, that says something.
You make it sound like The Wine Advocate was a disaster as a company and a miserable experience as an employee.
No, it was great because I got to work with Bob Parker when he was at his prime. You know, and Bob was like a second father to me, and we talked on the phone all the time, and he gave me great advice.
Can anyone's palate dominate the wine criticism business the way Parker's did? And should anyone's palate dominate it the way his did?
I just think the world is very different today. You know, I mean, it's just a totally different world. It's probably not healthy to have a single person dominating the world.
It's not even wine criticism, it's the wine industry.
Yeah, that's probably not the healthiest thing in the world. But I think that there's just such an opportunity right now with social media and technology to reach such a massive number of people that I think it's possible that 1 or 2 people will actually have more influence than Bob Parker did, because they will, again, this goes back to your first question, not trying to be a version of somebody else. You see this in sports all the time. It's like, oh, well, nobody will ever beat this record. And then somebody comes along, you know, it's like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have 2 guys who are ahead of that and 1 knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital, 1998. Then the tech bubble melted down. Then there was a mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday. They'd just been in a big bull market. It's very different. So I'm very lucky. People of my generation or a little bit younger have actually had to deal with a lot more crises. I think that's actually good for learning how to cope with challenges in business.
From the outside, it kind of looks like you're trying to demolish the house that Parker built, right? You left the Wine Advocate.
Yeah.
You merged with one of his chief rivals.
Yeah.
And you just hired his successor, Neil Martin.
Mm-hmm.
So are you?
I think what that says is that all the best people want to work at our company. And that's really what we strive to create starting in 2013. We wanted to create a world-class company that would attract the best-in-class talent, and not just on the content side, on the technology side, on the digital side, our office, and at every level, what we're trying to, we only hire superstars, and we're looking for those superstars.
In the world of professional wrestling, there's something called a swerve.
Hulk Hogan has betrayed WCW.
Some examples. These tag team partners are called babyfaces, or the good guys. Then one of them swerves when he super kicks his tag team partner in the head, quickly assuming the role of the bad guy, or what the wrestling world calls the heel.
Are you kidding? What a despicable act that was!
Or a match is almost lost when, what's that? The superstar wrestler appears out of nowhere sprinting down the aisle to save the match.
That's the Warriors music! That's the Ultimate Warrior!
That's a swerve. So it should go as no surprise that World Wrestling Entertainment, known as the WWE, the most popular brand of sports entertainment in the world, is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag #GiveDivas_a_chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture
because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music and their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook or or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Thank you very much for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
I've always been relieved ever since you were appointed, because at least until your appointment, I seem to have the most unpronounceable name. But now, so we will keep it as Dara and John. This conference is called The Year Ahead, but in your case, you are close to 6 months into the job. And I wondered what you saw in terms of the year ahead at Uber as your biggest challenge. What's the thing that you think about most when it comes to 2018?
We definitely have our share of challenges at Uber. And for me, where I want to get Uber to the year ahead is a year of normalcy. 2017 was, I think, will go down as one of the most difficult years for any company out there. And I have to give credit to the Uber team and the employees there. It is a group of true believers who believe in our mission, who believe in mobility as a service being available to consumers everywhere at a reasonable cost. And what my job in 2018 is to get rid of the distractions and get the company back to business, get the company back to normalcy. There's a lot that we've done in the past 6 months as far as bringing in new investors, driving a new culture and norms where doing the right thing, period, comes first, bringing a new management team, et cetera. There's a lot that we've gotten done, but This is a company that knows how to execute. This is a service. Mobility as a service is something that's universal, that's needed in the world. And I just want to get back to doing business.
It's quite interesting. You said true believers.
Yeah.
Normally, true believers are the last possible people where you're able to change a culture. Can you explain a bit about that?
Well, I think that they understand that mobility as a service, bringing the cost of transportation down, making transportation services available to anyone and everyone on a local basis, and partnering with cities to be a solution to traffic, to pollution, et cetera, that is a mission that they all believe in. And I think that they, having seen what happened in 2017, to some extent the crisis, the enormous crisis that the company has gone through, is a benefit because everybody at the company knows now that we need to change, that we need to break with the past as far as the way the company was run. We need to go from growth at any cost to responsible growth and growth in partnership with other players out there. That's clear, but now I've got to kind of get the company down to the normalcy of execution, of building great technology, and I think we're going to get there. It's still some tough sledding early on, but I absolutely think we're going to get there.
When you talk about execution, is profits one of the things you want to get? I think you lost $4 billion last year.
Well, profits,
peanuts by the standards of
profits would help. Yes. So at some point we absolutely have to become profitable, and that's part of the plan.
But do you have a kind of goal for that? Do you think you should be profitable by 2022 or by 2020?
I think that we'll be profitable before 2022. This is the business itself.
Do you want to come back a bit closer, 2020?
Yeah, listen, it's not going to, I don't want to name a specific year, but this is a business that the core business, the ride-sharing business, can be profitable within 3 years. We will continue to make very aggressive investments in building out autonomy because we think that's a terrific opportunity for building out new technologies such as Uber Elevate, where near-term profitability is not a goal, but long-term growth is. So we will look to balance near-term profitability, but as a company, we will always be a company that makes big, bold bets and takes big risks.
To what extent, though, do you think that drive to become profitable fights against a little bit of this culture change? If you want to make, you talked about making money, but not at all costs. Do those two things spar against each other?
I don't think that profitability and culture are their issue. It's the company in the past was willing to make trade-offs as it related to how it did business, and I think was guilty of hubris, was guilty of thinking that they knew better than others, and I think that what we know now clearly is that breakneck growth can hide cultural issues, that there are no excuses for not doing the right thing, and that you do have to make trade-offs. And as a management team, we're specifically talking about those trade-offs that you have to make. We have to be a little more patient sometimes because working with governments, regulators, et cetera, sometimes takes longer, but in the end, you build a more lasting business. And so maybe what we went through was necessary, but we're here. We can control our actions from this moment onwards, and I think everyone at Uber from this moment onwards wants to build a great company, not only in terms of growth, but in terms of the kind of company anyone would want to work at.
Can I ask you one thing which you have got a sort of hangover from last year, which is all the regulatory problems, and particularly all the cases against you? I think there are 6 criminal probes or whatever going on.
The lawyers are lining up outside the door.
Which one do you sort of think? Which one do you fear most? I suppose out of these different things.
Listen, I think that all of them are serious issues, and my response is that we're going to be transparent and we're going to take responsibility for our actions in the past. I do think that there are certain circumstances where there was smoke but no fire, and I think as a company we have to defend ourselves and work within kind of the appropriate frameworks. And my goal is just to get beyond this stuff.
Some of these things like pricing policies, surely they go right to the heart of what Uber is, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I think they do, but I think that there's a way of being smart but transparent at the same time, and that's where we've got to take the company.
Take me through governments. When you talk to governments privately, do they talk any differently than they do publicly?
Governments?
Yes, governments.
I think that they are honestly a bit relieved with how we are engaging with them, because I think that the engagement is now real. I think they feel like we're out there, we're genuine because we've learned our lessons of the past, and I do think that we can take, for example, the data that we have in terms of traffic and in terms of movement of our drivers and riders, and we can use that data to partner up with cities in order to solve congestion issues, because congestion doesn't help anyone. It wastes enormous amounts of time for consumers. It hurts the environment. And I think that we are aligned with cities, for example, to partner with them in a fundamental way to solve these problems. And I do think that when these are conversations that a number of regulators and cities have wanted to have with us for many years, and I think we are really engaging with them at a depth that I think is going to create a real win-win going forward.
Do you think you were too confrontational on this before?
Yeah, I do. I think that the company was pushing growth. And listen, any innovator, to some extent, the innovation is about questioning past kind of present practices. It's about breaking things, the Facebook breaking things. We just went a step and a half too far. And what I want to keep, hopefully, is the best of both worlds, which is this spirit of innovation, the spirit of can-do, et cetera, but the responsibility of partnership. We don't know better than you. We're actually going to work with you, of actually having dialogue and respect for our city partners, for regulators, and then continuing to take risks and continuing to do daring things. And I think we can accomplish that.
Imagine this audience here is a collection of mayors or a collection of city officials, and you want to depict, this is the Year Ahead conference, depict what the years ahead in this thing are going to be like. How far is driverless cars going to go? You talked just a few days ago about the idea of there being flying cars in 10 years' time. Can you just give a description of what you think transport is going to look like?
Well, I think that we think there are three keys to transport and where the industry is going: autonomous, electric, and shared. And I think all three are necessary in order to get to the next level of city planning, et cetera. There are many cities where up to a fifth of the space taken in these cities is taken by parking and storing these cars. And so I do think that you need autonomous, you need electric, and you need shared. And I do think it's going to take some time. True autonomy for every single use case is some ways away. What we bring to bear is our developing autonomy, and we will have autonomous cars on the road, I believe, within the next 18 months, not as a kind of a test case, but as a real case out there. And over a period of time, we're going to bring autonomous transportation and feather it in with the non-autonomous transportation with drivers.
What does feathering in mean?
Feathering in
to a layman like me? Crashing.
Yeah, feathering in means if you're, for example, in Phoenix, and you make a request to go from A to B, which is what you do with Uber, there will be 95% of cases where we may not have everything mapped perfectly, or the weather may not be the right weather, or there may be an accident on the road, or you may not have 2 or 3 ways of getting from A to B, where you may say, you know what, that's not an autonomous use case. We're going to send a driver to pick that person up. For 5% of cases, everything is going to fall into place. And we will send an autonomous car. The user will be able to pick, do you want, there's an autonomous car, yes or no? And we'll be able to service that A for B. That 5% is going to go to 10 and 15 and 20 as our computers and our algorithms learn more and more about what it takes to drive in a city in a real life situation. And every minute of every day, that driver, that computer is going to get better and know Phoenix better and better and better. And in 5 years, we'll have the perfect driver in Phoenix. We will have to retrain that driver in every single city. We're going to have to build out 3D maps of these cities. And it will take time, but over a period of time, you essentially have a driver who becomes the perfect driver. It'll take 10 to 15 years, but that's the feathering in that I'm talking about.
And will a child born today, will they ever need to learn how to drive?
A child born today? No, I don't think so.
So within sort of 20 years from now, we will...
I don't think so. Listen, I hear some groans.
And also,
I heard a couple of groans. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. 1.3 million people die from car crashes every year. That doesn't count an estimated 20 to 50 million people that are injured. Okay, this is actually a public safety issue. If you look at cars, 96% of cars, 96% of time, cars are sitting there not being used. It is a huge amount of pollution that's caused by these cars being in the road, and a huge amount of wasted time. So the safety is there. Electrification is absolutely key, and sharing these platforms is going to allow us to be much safer and also put our assets where they add value.
But it's quite interesting because when you first came in, I remember you sounding somewhat more skeptical about self-driving cars. You've been converted. Is that a?
The choir has spoken, and I'm listening. It's pretty exciting technology out there. But again, it will be a hybrid technology for some period of time.
What about flying cars? That came as a slight surprise.
Yes, that's a great project that we're working on. It's called Uber Elevate. And it is actually about battery technology.
It would have helped a lot of people here.
I know. I wish that I was available. We'll launch it here if we can. But battery technology is allowing us to have multiple rotors on planes, or helicopters, if you want to call them that. These rotors that are much smaller will be much quieter than helicopters are. Much quieter, much safer. If you add sharing into the equation, you can actually get the economics of going from A to B. We think within 5 to 7 years to a place where normal people would think about taking these flying cars. That'll be the beginning, and then it's about scaling. And we're working with a number of partners right now.
Do you think the regulation on flying cars, I've heard some proponents of it argue that it might be easier than it has been on driverless cars, because driverless cars, you have to deal with existing roads, existing everything. Flying cars, essentially you're going into unconquered space.
I think that mayors that are forward-thinking understand that traffic and pollution are a real issue, and I think flying cars can be a significant solution to traffic issues in cities. And these cars, to start with, they're going to be very specific. They'll be kind of highways in the air. There'll be very specific routes that these flying cars go on. They're not going to be able to take you to your backyard and land in your backyard. There'll be these skyports. So there'll be very specific routes that you go on. And I think if you build a regulatory framework that has that kind of structure around it, I think you get to a better solve.
Can I drag you back, somewhat reluctantly, back to the real world? But you have Rajiv Misra, who came in with you from SoftBank.
Yes.
He's going to become a director. Last week, he said that Uber should focus on repairing its market share in the US and on key European markets, rather than going to new ones. Do you agree with that? Is that the way you look at Uber?
I think one of the fundamental strengths of Uber is the global scope that we have. This is
you
brand.
had that motto, everywhere. What's it? Everywhere for everyone.
Yeah, everywhere for everyone.
Do you want to make it some places for some people?
No, we like the everywhere for everyone. It's much sexier than some places for some people.
That's telling me.
Just not interesting. I do think seriously though the global scope that our company brings is important. Our being able to build technology that we can amortize essentially everywhere in the world is hard, but it is part of the fundamental value that we introduce. So I would look at Uber very much as a global brand. That said, we're going to look at all opportunities, but at this point, we are leaning forward. In 2018, for us, is going to be very much a lean forward year for the company.
But without, I'm not trying to create new boardroom tension at Uber, but that would appear that SoftBank is keener on a more limited idea, whilst you're keener on everywhere for everyone.
Well, listen, SoftBank is a very important shareholder. They're our largest shareholder, and many of our shareholders have opinions over what's the right thing to do. Ultimately, the governance of the company is going to be at the board, and we'll have those discussions at the board, and we'll set our long-term strategy, and then execute on it.
One of the things which Uber played, perhaps not very fortunately, a role in was the whole sexual harassment questions and everything to do with that. I suppose one very obvious question, do you think that you have solved that part of the culture? But secondly, do you think that this is a real revolution and it's going to stick?
I think that what was happening at Uber was serious, and I think that while what Uber went through was difficult, I think the Susan Fowler blog was probably one of the best things that happened for Uber, and it certainly started a movement that's an incredibly important movement of the company. I'd be reticent to say that it's solved.
Yeah.
But it's not an endemic issue within the culture of the company, and I think the company has learned, and I think the company took very harsh and appropriate steps to make sure that kind of behavior is absolutely clear, that kind of behavior is not accepted in any way, shape, or form of the company, regardless of where you are, regardless of if you're a great performer or not. So I think we're at the right place for Uber as a company, but I think in general, we're not where we need to be in terms of women in senior positions, making sure that we're welcoming of women in technology, and we help women really build their careers within our company. There's a great kind of bottoms-up energy there, but we're not where we need to be, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
On the issue of, you talked about the top performers, is that looking back, and also I suppose looking forward for many of the people in this room, because there are a lot of people's businesses which have been affected by this. If you had to give lessons to other people who are now looking at this issue, perhaps more seriously than they have done before, is the really bad issue, and I suppose I'm thinking in some ways about the media industry in this, is that giving top performers more room for maneuver or whatever than people, or more discretion than people thought? Is that top performers need to be treated the same as everybody else?
I think they absolutely need to be held accountable. One of the really valuable lessons that I got early in my life was actually through Jack Welch, and he said, it's very tempting to allow top performers to misbehave in any way, but for me, he was talking about being aligned with the CEO. Sometimes you allow top performers, the tendency is, well, let them get away with some kind of behavior that is not the right behavior because they're so good. And what Jack told me very early on is that it's the top performers who are problematic culturally that are the most dangerous, because they have followership within the company, because people look up to them. So he's like the dumb person who is bad culturally. He's not the problem, because everyone says, well, that's a dumb person, so who cares? It's the smart person who has followership. So it is incredibly important for the top performers to actually be held to account more radically than anyone else, because they're the ones who have followership at the company, and they have to set the example. So for me personally, that has absolutely guided how I've managed. Expedia was a company that had, excellent cultural values. And one of the first things we did at Uber was to go out and reset our cultural values, and we call them norms, because to me, it's not just these values that you put on the wall and kind of people stare at and it's all nice. It's about behavior. And we set out to change behavior at Uber, and I think that the company was thirsting for it, and we are starting on a path, and I believe it's going to be a positive path.
An inevitable question, I hope you won't regard it as a cheap shot, but you talked about smart people who have followers throughout a company. I mean, Travis would seem to be the epitome of that sort of figure. Do you think of him as being in that category of people that Jack Welch was talking about?
I think, listen, Travis was the CEO of the company, and he had incredible followership, and he was held to account, right? I mean, he's no longer the CEO of the company, and he's a board member. He's a big investor, and so he's absolutely going to play a part on the board. But we've also been very clear as a company that we do have to make a break with the past, with how we behaved as a company, and to some extent with the new CEO being a very different kind of a CEO. So in the end, you have to be held accountable, and I think that Travis was held accountable, and at this point, he's a board member and a constructive one at that.
If you look around the world now, where do you see the next competitors to Uber? You've obviously got Lyft breathing down your neck.
Yes.
Where else do they come from?
Well, I think that as you move into a world of autonomy, the position of the car manufacturers, the position of, for example, Google, who's developing Waymo and Waymo autonomous technology, you're going to get a lot of players interested in the space. And a lot of people think about Uber and ride sharing as a significant enterprise, and it is. But the fact is that we account for less than 1% of miles driven on the road now. When autonomy comes in, that number over the next 10 years is going to be closer, I believe, to 15 to 20%. So because we're not yet a true alternative to car ownership, and I believe that as you bring autonomous and you bring the price of mobility down and make it available to everybody, everywhere, then we become a real alternative to car ownership, and that really opens up the market for us, but it also opens us up to many more competitors.
And is Google at the forefront of those competitors at the moment?
Google is one of many. I think that they've developed very strong autonomous technology, but what we think, which is exceptional, is having autonomous technology and the network under one roof, which allows us to use autonomous in a very practical way, nearer than you think.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
TGIF, everyone, live from our homes in New York and New Jersey.
Did you forget where you were?
No, actually, I was like, wait, is Jason in the office today? And I'm looking at your home, and I'm like, I see the frozen stickers.
I see Anna and Elsa, and I'm wearing a hoodie, so must be Westchester.
Must be Alice's bedroom. We're also on YouTube, of course, as always. It's Friday, TGIF, everyone, September 18th, 2020. We're kind of goofy, but, man, there's some pessimism in the equity markets today.
Yeah, it's been 3 days of, it feels like, deceleration to some extent, or de-enthusiasm, maybe, as we think about an election, we think about the fall, we think about getting back to school or not, in the case of New York City at least. So lots to get to. But we'll have some fun moments throughout the next 4 hours, I guarantee it.
A little rock and roll. In fact, there's a teaser. Not quite a spoiler alert, but a little bit. All right, let's get to your top business stories. Let's actually see what's going on in that trading day. Here is Charlie Bell.
Hi, thank you very much. Here's what's going on in the office. Keeping it real, we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all declining on this Friday, on track for another losing week. Let's begin with the numbers. I'll give you the why in a moment. Here's where we stand off. Session lows, S&P now down 49. That is a drop of 1.5%. Worst level of the day. The S&P had been down 64, down 1.9%. The Dow had been down almost 400, slumping now by 330, down 1.4%. NASDAQ down 1.8%, down 195 points. Your NASDAQ 100 index down 2.1%. Tech shares are leading markets lower as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. Crude oil right now is lower as well, down 0.4%, 40.81 a barrel on WTI. Gold up 0.5%. 1%, 1953. 10-year up 132nd, the yield now 0.68%. Recapping equities lower, S&P down 50, a drop of 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser. And as we said, it has been a little bit ugly, a little uglier today when it comes to the major indices here in the United States. So as we go into the weekend, let's understand where investors' heads are. For that, we've got the perfect team. Bloomberg News global macro strategist Vincent Signorella is joining us from White Plains, as is Dave Wilson. He's not in White Plains. He's in New Jersey. He is our Bloomberg Stocks editor, author of the chart and stock of the day. Dave, let me start with you. That trade, take us into the contours. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, you're talking about a third straight weekly decline for the S&P 500, kind of wrapping up today. You haven't seen a losing streak that long all year, which is saying something. All 11 of the main industry groups in the S&P 500 are lower. I mean, big tech really kind of leading the way down. You look at Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google's owner Alphabet. They're all taking hits. Facebook, not so much. Of course, you've got the saga of the Chinese apps that are going to be taken off app stores on Sunday, assuming the companies follow through on what the U.S. government is demanding with the video sharing app TikTok and the social media app WeChat. So, you know, Facebook faring relatively well. That said, it's down too. I mean, Tesla, really the exception. You're seeing some share price estimates go up, and you know, the stock's higher too. And beyond that, it really is a pretty broad-based decline with tech, no surprise, leading the way down.
Yeah, exactly. One of my trader buddies sending me a note, Matt Maley over at Miller Tabak, saying Apple went down and so did the market. Vince, come on in on the trade today. What are you hearing? You're one of our trader buddies too. What are you hearing? What's going on? What's really kind of determining what happens, certainly in the financial markets and the equity market in particular right now?
Well, a couple of things. One is just a lack of news. I mean, literally a lack of a positive move forward with any new stimulus. And time's running out. You know, we're going to have people leaving Washington, politicians going back on the campaign trail relatively soon. And then the other thing is there are a lot of things that can go wrong coming up, even before the end of this month or at the end of this month. That are starting to weigh on risk. The money that went to the airlines and the promise of not firing people, that time limit expires at the end of the month. And if there's no new stimulus or aid to airlines, we're going to see some big layoffs. Actually, tweet just coming across from Fox News saying Pelosi and the House Transportation Chair will be meeting with the airline CEOs today. And there's two different factions that are pushing for aid, and Pelosi suggesting that's not something she was too interested in this morning. So we'll see how that goes later on. And, you know, you also have the situation of the reopenings. We're seeing a resurgence. Boris Johnson saying we're seeing a second wave of the virus in the UK. Ireland is basically trying to shut down the city of Dublin for at least the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we may see the same thing, you know, hopefully not, but we may now see the same thing in New York as New York goes back to school, and that's been pushed back a little bit, and people go back to work. So it's a lot of things hanging in the wind that are making people uncomfortable with risk.
Yeah, and listen, if the airlines are having a hard time, just think about, I mean, we know they are, of course, but I mean, if they need some kind of extra bailout, just think about, you know, how many small businesses are just either folding or just thinking about folding. And again, that's such an important lifeline to our economy, Vince.
Now, you make a super point. I mean, the large companies are in a position to raise capital. Even the ones that were struggling, we left some month or so ago when Hertz was going to the market for in bankruptcy, offering shares, and people were buying the things or wanted to buy them. You know, the small businesses don't have that lifeline. They have the small business loans that are supposedly coming from Main Street via the Fed, but there's been a lot of holdup in that. You know, banks aren't really willing to lend, from what we understand. They don't want to take losses on those loans. And if they're not reaching those small businesses, if they don't have that lifeline, there's really nowhere for them to go.
Oh, well, you're so...
Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Vince.
Break out the scotch as we speak, everybody.
Pour that
Break out
scotch a little early.
essential oils.
Yeah, just neat, please. No cubes, no water. All right.
Jerry, I can give you something.
Yes,
Give
please,
us,
Dave.
please.
Unity Software, which began trading today, up 34.5% from its initial public offering price. And that had been raised from their proposed range. So, up and away. Here we go again.
Listen, we could all use a little unity in our lives. So,
And you know what the ticker is?
What?
U.
Just
One
the letter
letter.
U?
Yes.
Wow. I'm surprised that wasn't taken.
It's like Madonna for the stock market.
I don't think it's been used since US Air
Rihanna.
was bought.
Rihanna
So
for
there
the
you go.
stock market.
Ah, since U.S. Air. Okay, so somebody had it at some point. All right.
See, and I
gentlemen,
thought
thank
Jason was
you.
going to say everybody just needs a hot pocket.
Well, listen, there's nothing wrong with a hot pocket.
He's so defensive
do not.
Oh,
do
Jason,
not
it's Hot
speak
Pocket
ill
calling. They've got a
of the Hot
delivery of
Pocket.
about 10 cases for you.
Seriously, listen, I would endorse Hot Pocket in a hot minute. All right, Vincent Signorella, thank you so much. Global macro strategist for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from White Plains. Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg. He'll be back with us in just a little bit with his chart of the day and later his stock. Let's do the Bloomberg Biz Week Bite of the Day real quick.
Sure.
Carol, one number that tells us a lot. Today's number is 632%.
Yep.
It's a sports one. Dan Gilbert, Michigan billionaire, founder of Quicken Loans.
Talked with him.
He's now
Quick
worth
flex.
$47.6 billion, according to Forbes. His wealth has exploded during the pandemic, rising 632%, or $41 billion since March 18th, 2020.
Is that all Quicken Loans wealth?
Yeah. Also owns the Cleveland Cavaliers. Heard of him?
No, and listen, he's been really instrumental in revitalizing downtown Detroit. I've toured his offices with him.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, good for him. So among the other top billionaires, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Musk, they've seen their wealth climb by 62, 79, and 222% respectively. But Gilbert, he's got Musk beat. That's hard to do.
Oh, and look, Jason Kelly, billion. No, sorry.
Exactly.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to wait a while for that one.
I'm just going to say we have an amazing show coming up. Nancy Pelosi, Alphabet CFO. We've got a couple of great stories on the Bloomberg, also in the magazine. And then we're going to wrap up with some rock and roll. We've got the founder of the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. This is an incredible guy.
It's gone virtual, but it's still
gone
awesome.
virtual.
Let's get to Washington now and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. A majority of President Trump's supporters plan to cast their ballot in person on Election Day, while about half of Joe Biden's backers plan to vote by mail. That's according to a new poll from the Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research. It finds 54% of voters say they will vote before polls open November 3rd. The poll finds 39% of registered voters say they will vote by mail, well above the 21% who say they normally do it. In-person voting is now underway in 7 states: Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, South Dakota, Vermont, Virginia, and Wyoming. The U.S. will ban some transactions over WeChat and TikTok beginning on Sunday. Bloomberg's Amy Morris with the latest from Washington.
Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says the U.S. will prohibit unspecified transactions related to WeChat and its parent company, Tencent Holdings. The Commerce Department says TikTok has until November 12th to resolve national security concerns, and if they can do that, the prohibitions that go into effect on Sunday may be lifted. TikTok owner ByteDance has been negotiating with Oracle to take a stake in the company to alleviate the president's concerns about American users' data being exposed to China. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Facebook is again being sued for allegedly spying on Instagram users, this time through the unauthorized use of their mobile phone cameras. The lawsuit springs from media reports back in July that the photo-sharing app appeared to be accessing iPhone cameras even when they were not actively being used. Facebook denies the reports. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser. So the story on Wall Street this week is one of like, get back to work. Oh, wait, go home.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Well, welcome to a world with a really tough virus. Goldman Sachs sending some traders home from its headquarters in New York City after at least one employee tested positive for COVID-19. This is according to people with knowledge of the matter. The quarantine imposed on a select group directly exposed to the infected worker at the firm's downtown office. The bank is moving forward with plans, though, to start bringing back staffers across most divisions, telling some to prepare for week in, week out rotational shifts starting in October. I think that's how it's going to happen. Like even our own offices, we have, I think, a 50% capacity max in terms of how many people we can bring in. So how do you do it? How do you do it to make sure it's safe? How do you make sure that you're maintaining your culture, maintaining some of that face-to-face, socially distanced face-to-face? And I think maybe that's how you do it.
Yeah, and how do you sort of diminish the risk, knowing that the risk can't be zero? I also do wonder, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, like, what is the right reaction? What's the proportionate reaction in terms of, okay, is it direct exposure that dictates that you need to go home and or quarantine? Is it you're on the same floor? Is it you're in the same building?
Because we went through this in the beginning. I remember a bunch of, I think, reporters had gone to a conference, and then somebody came down with the virus, and they're like, do all of us? And then we had a meeting, another group had a meeting with some of these people. I'm like, does that mean us? And and so we're learning, but I think, we're figuring that out, right?
And ultimately, we're going to need guidance from a federal perspective, or at least a state perspective, in terms of almost a flow chart of this proximity and those sorts of things. So we're going to continue to work it out, just like schools are figuring it out, offices are figuring it out. A little tension here and there, but as you say, this is living with a global pandemic. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Tension is certainly par for the course. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, just getting started on this Friday. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, developing story. JP Morgan Chase has told about 200 staff to plan to move out of London because it sees little prospect of the UK winning a deal on financial services as the nation prepares to exit the European Union. JP Morgan Chase shares, they're trading lower by about 0.1%. It is a down Friday, indeed on track for a losing week. Technology shares leading stocks lower. It is also a quadruple witching Friday. We've got the S&P down 51, a drop now of 1.5%. The Dow's down 329, have been down about 400, lower now by 1.2%. NASDAQ is down 193, down 1.8%. 10-year yield 0.68%. Gold's up 0.5%, 19.53 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, 40.87 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right. Charlie, thank you very much.
All right, Charlie.
Jason and I run to this next guest.
We
'cause
do.
really do
I look forward to it every week.
Me too.
I really do.
I do want to just put out there as we get ready to talk with Dr. Ian Losbader, a stunning and disturbing statistic, and you can read about it in depth on the Bloomberg, but the U.S. will top 200,000 deaths from the novel coronavirus in coming days. So talk about a milestone. So let's talk about that and talk about where we are in the virus and the race for a vaccine. Dr. Ian Losbader is back with us, Clinical Associate Professor of Medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center, on the phone in New York City. Dr. Losbader, truly, Jason and I look forward to these weekly conversations. How are you?
My pleasure. Always great to be with you guys, and I hope you have a healthy week, a safe weekend, and definitely it's a challenge with all the data coming in. It's hard to coordinate it all, but we'll try and make sense of it.
So, Ian, I wanted to ask you about something because there's a great article. I'm going to put it out on Twitter, and there's a full personal disclosure here. Great piece in Time Magazine that was floated among my family because my aunt in Atlanta, who is a nutritionist at Emory, she is part of a vaccine trial, and she's interviewed in this story, and it's the Moderna vaccine. And it gave me, some measure of hope in terms of her being interviewed and what they're talking about in terms of all these vaccines moving forward. Now, there are a lot of cautions in this piece as well, and it talks about, the need for 2 shots. And the fact that, there's all these different things going on. We don't know exactly what is going to work, what combination of things are going to work, the efficacy and the safety. What's the thing that you've heard of late that's the most important when it comes to vaccines, Ian?
This is really uncharted territory. We haven't dealt with a pandemic of this size really since 1918, the so-called Spanish flu. And we've had the swine flu and other epidemics and pandemics. But this is really uncharted territory, and we're learning as we go in terms of the different manifestations and the diffuse clotting and so forth, and how some people have a very mild case and other people succumb. So I think we're learning a number of things. One is that even people who have the disease and who develop antibodies do have lower antibody levels along the way. And I've had a number of patients with very high antibody levels who do relatively well with the infection. And over time, we've checked their antibodies, and the levels definitely seem to drop. Now, we don't know how far down they will go, and we don't know if they have a cellular or a T-cell response that will protect them. But this really does argue for everyone getting a vaccine. We also don't know which is really going to be the most effective vaccine. Is it a messenger RNA? Is it a different technique? That we're really going to have to see. We're just starting to get the data from the phase 3 trials with tens of thousands of patients getting tested. And overall, it looks like at this point that it does seem fairly safe. There was that one case with AstraZeneca, and there may be other cases that we'll learn about. But overall, it appears the vaccines are fairly safe, and from what I'm hearing, fairly effective. Now, how long that will be, or will people need a booster shot, which they probably will, I think we're going to have to kind of see how that goes. But of course, in the interim, the cases are in, have continue, and of course, unfortunately, the deaths now up to over 200,000. We did anticipate these numbers. These numbers were just based on the trajectory. They shouldn't be, of course, they're upsetting, but they shouldn't be shocking because these numbers were all really guesstimated along the way. So I think we're making some progress.
So I do want to ask you about a vaccine, though, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm at some point going to be taking a vaccine. Should we wait for the one that is the most effective? Is there complications with taking multiple vaccines? Like, I want to understand this as an individual.
I think that great questions, Carol, as always. I don't think we have those answers, and is it possible that people may need two different kinds of vaccines? In other words, a messenger RNA and perhaps another one. I think it's way too early to determine that, and I think the first priority, will be those frontline workers and healthcare workers who need some protection when they're encountering patients. And I do suspect that eventually, as more and more people get vaccinated, it will be clear, whether combinations of vaccines work or whether you'll be protected. And I think we'll be able to check antibody levels along the way, and I think that will give us a bit of a clue. But I think the feeling is even if you have some exposure with a vaccine, even if you have some antibody response, that should help in reducing the severity of the effects of the virus. And again, we don't know whether this will come back as a seasonal coronavirus, which other coronaviruses, are common cold viruses or seasonal flu viruses. But vaccinating everyone, just like we vaccinate everyone for the flu, should give some degree of protection.
Do we ultimately, we're going to come back and talk, but just 30 seconds, do we ultimately, as a population, as a country, build up an immunity that we don't need vaccines in the future? Or no? You just said we're going to probably have to be taking these.
Yeah, that's my sense. I think for people who have the disease, they may be better protected. But we don't even know that because we do see antibodies that are high and do begin to drop down over time. Will they go to zero? We don't know.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to come back in just a couple minutes on the other side of some news with Dr. Ian Lustbader, our go-to guy, our go-to doc, clinical associate professor of medicine at NYU's Langone Medical Center. He is on the phone from New York City. I want to talk to him about reopenings. We heard the sort of one step forward, two steps back going on Wall Street. We saw yesterday New York City delaying its opening of schools. So stop and start as we try and figure this out, Carol.
Yeah, that is our world, no doubt about it. All right, we're going to come back with Dr. Ian Lustbader, as Jason said, over at NYU Langone Medical Center. He really is a go-to voice for us, has been throughout all of this, and actually for the last couple of years on so many different medical issues. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to talk reopening, safety, and so much more as the fall brings a whole new season of sorts.
You know what? As soon as it got cold, I was like, oh my God.
Here we go.
That's what it just like took me back to spring. All right, we're going to get back to Dr. Ian Lustbader in just a moment. Quick check, though, on your top business stories, and that trading day here is once again Charlie Pellet.
Thank you very much. Quick check indeed. LVMH submitting proposed Tiffany deal for European Commission antitrust approval. That headline now on the Bloomberg. Tiffany shares their higher now up by 0.7%. Tech shares leading the way lower this Friday as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ off session lows, but red on the Bloomberg here with the S&P down 46. A drop now of 1.4%. NASDAQ down 166, down 1.5%. The Dow is down 295, a drop of 1.1%. NASDAQ 100 index down 1.8%. 10-year yield 0.69%. Gold up 0.5%, 19.53 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%. Well, as schools reopen and people return to work, one of the big questions for health researchers battling COVID-19 is, will we see a second wave? Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. He was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television.
The winter months may bring a surge of not only COVID-19 because people are being inside more, they're coming in close contact with each other some more. We're also seeing other respiratory viruses that may be making an increase this fall and winter. So all of these things really highlight the fact that we need to spend the time now to make sure that the public health interventions that we want to put in place are there and that we can effectively monitor and keep case numbers down as we move into the winter months.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. MasterCard is encouraging its staff to begin returning to its New York area offices, joining other large employers seeking to bring back workers after months at home. MasterCard shares, they're lower right now, down by 1.1%. Recapping, equities are declining. S&P down 43, down 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. Let's get back to our conversation with Dr. Ian Lustbader over at NYU's Langone Medical Center. So, Ian, let's jump right into what you just heard Charlie talking about. He was talking about MasterCard. We heard from one of our friends down at Johns Hopkins about this sort of reopening mode that we're in as we get into the fall. When you read the headlines about banks saying, come on in, and then got to go home, or de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, saying, yeah, we're going to hold off for a couple weeks, what do you make of it? Where are we at this point?
It's definitely, again, uncharted territory, but I think everyone agrees it's important to get back to work, both for economic health and psychological health. Although we do have a lot of patients who are very worried, teachers and professors who are very worried about being in close proximity to kids who, as we know, can harbor the virus with minimal symptoms. And so I think developing a good strategy to allow people to get back safely is important. And part of that, some of the data has come out that everyone wearing masks actually seems to be reducing the incidence of influenza as well as coronavirus, which makes sense, right? Because obviously flu, I mean, they're both viruses and they both are respiratory viruses and both coughing, sneezing, and so forth. So I think the whole mask concept is going to be with us for a while, even during flu season. That being said, you need a strategy to bring people back. What some colleges are doing, is the spit testing, the antigen tests, which can be helpful before people come back to school. Some of them are getting nasal swabs, which can be helpful. In New York City, it's not everyone has access to that, but I do think the schools can certainly do these pods where you rotate kids who come in group, so smaller groups, because if one of those kids happens to get sick, then you isolate that group, but you don't affect the whole class. So there are a lot of strategies, and even the CDC is as to the best strategy. There's not unlimited testing, and they recently, as of today, actually just reversed course on whether or not you should test asymptomatic people. Right. And I think certainly if someone feels fine and they're going to visit someone at risk, an elderly parent or relative, it does make sense to get a nasal swab, and if that's negative, you can feel really pretty reassured that even if you do masks or social distancing, that your risk of injuring your relative is very low. Whether or not a random encounter in an elevator or you hear someone in the office had COVID, do you really need to be tested? I think that's individual, and if someone feels completely fine, sure, in the best of all worlds, it's probably not a bad idea to be tested, but I don't think people should panic about that, because casual contact is certainly outside if you're passing people and so forth. That's really a very low risk.
I feel like in an ideal world, I mean, we've kind of gotten used to, for most of us, wearing masks. Like Jason and I were kind of kidding, that when I leave the house, I kind of, if I forget, I'm like, oh my God, it's like, not putting a seatbelt on in a car. It just has become such a part of our process. I do feel like, do we get to a point in our world, especially if these viruses are going to stick around, in that, taking a COVID test is going to be as routine as brushing our teeth every morning?
Well, perhaps for the time being, until we do get a vaccine, and just like people do not get routine flu shots, routine flu testing, or nasal swabs, which we can do for influenza. If people come into the ER very sick, high fever, you do a nasal swab and you can determine if they have the flu or coronavirus or a variety of other respiratory pathogens. So I think when people get vaccinated, and I understand the anti-vax fears, but when these are really safe and tested, I think that will significantly reduce the need for everyone to be tested on a very frequent basis, unless there's something that's really suspicious.
In the meantime, wear a mask, right?
In the meantime, wear a mask, use your head, do social distancing, and the number of cases certainly in the Northeast and in areas, pockets that are careful, that the number of cases does seem to be going down, and hopefully that second wave will not be as bad as we think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, and our thanks to Dr. Ian Lesbader, I mean, it does feel like the science, even the sort of retroactive science, basically says, had we been wearing masks in much greater numbers back in the spring, those numbers don't hit where they hit when it comes to sickness and death. The science is pretty clear on this, from the CDC, from Johns Hopkins, and elsewhere. Listen, Morgan Freeman, he's saying wear a mask. Wear a mask.
Keep Morgan safe. Keep all of us safe. Listen, I now know that if we get viruses like this in the future, like right away, I bet most of us will put on a mask.
Got a cool mask I was wearing in the office yesterday. It's like a festive Darth Vader mask.
You're so cool, Jason Kelly. All right, our thanks
to my sister-in-law for that one.
Ian Lesbader over at NYU Langone Medical Center. Really a great go-to voice for us. Let's get to world and national news headlines. Over to Nancy Lyons we go in D.C. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Both presidential candidates will be in the battleground state of Minnesota today. President Trump will hold a rally tonight in Bemidji. Joe Biden will tour a union training center this afternoon in Duluth. Well, the election is already underway in Minnesota, with in-person voting now allowed there and in 6 other states. And Joe Biden's campaign plans to spend at least $100 million to encourage supporters to vote as early as possible. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports.
A Biden official says it will be a voter education effort aimed at communicating how to vote by mail and in person. Democrats say they hope to counter misinformation that could suppress the vote, including from President Trump and Attorney General William Barr. The Biden official says the first round of the effort will begin soon in Georgia, Minnesota, Virginia, and Wisconsin, and will include mailings, digital communications, and possibly TV ads. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Alabama Governor Kay Ivey took a tour today of some of the areas damaged by Hurricane Sally. She held a briefing in Gulf State Park and Gulf Shores.
Not only will we rebuild, but we will rebuild stronger than ever before.
She says while flying over the area today, many of the bridges and piers looked more like just sticks in the water. The National Hurricane Center is tweeting today, get out the Greek alphabet. That's because with Tropical Storm Wilfred forming in the eastern Atlantic, they've exhausted all the traditional names set aside for tropical systems in what has become a record-setting Atlantic hurricane season. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser. And Carol, we talked about this briefly with Ian Lustbader over at NYU. This is a tough decision for the mayor of New York City to open, in some form or fashion, the nation's largest school system. And it was pushed back this week, a week or two, depending on how old you are.
Yeah.
And 4 days before they were all supposed to reopen for in-person instruction, delaying for elementary schools till September 29th and for middle and high school students until October 1st. He does not want to go fully remote. He understands or is making the case that you need to figure out a way for kids to actually go to school.
Listen, the easy route is to go all remote. The more difficult route, I mean, I have a daughter who's in a hybrid situation,
The easy route easy route in terms of, yes.
And safety, right? Just say, just everybody at home. And then I don't have to, because in order to bring kids back to school, there are things you need to put in place. Safety measures, you need to maybe structurally, whether it's filters, whether it's making sure your windows can open, classrooms, sometimes you have to bring in extra teachers to facilitate it. I mean, it's a much more difficult process. So, I do feel like damned if you do, damned if you don't, though, because if you go too fast and you bring the kids back and everybody gets sick, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
If you go too slow, they're like, what's going on? And I understand it from a parental perspective, totally. I think it's tricky. We don't have the playbook, and I have a lot of respect for everyone who takes it a little bit more slowly to make sure we do it the right way and the safer way.
I
Yes?
agree with
I don't
you.
know.
I think there are so many pressures, though. And this is an economic story. This is a social story. This
Kids'
is a mental health
education.
story.
Yeah.
This is an education story. We know about the gaps that already exist. So many pushes and pulls here as people try and make the right decision. And the scale of New York City and its school system certainly is part of this. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks now at a 6-week low as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. S&P down for a third day. It is quadruple witching Friday. S&P down 43, a drop there of 1.3%. That, by the way, is a quarterly event that typically fuels trading and sometimes volatility as large derivatives positions roll over. The Dow down 272, lower now by 1%. NASDAQ down 1.5%, down 161 points as the tech selling continues. Oracle edging lower after the U.S. said it will ban some transactions over TikTok. Oracle shares down by 0.6%. Tech shares lower, as I mentioned. Apple, for example, down 2.6%, and Microsoft weighing on NASDAQ down by 2.1%. 10-year yield 0.69%. Gold up 0.4%, 19.52 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2%, 41.07 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, I love this pairing. Max Chafkin and Joel Weber. Doesn't get much better than that on a Friday. Plus, Palantir, it is a nutty company, to use a term of art, as it were. Max Chafkin wrote the story, Palantir bad-mouthing big tech while taking its tech public. Checks out. We are talking about Peter Thiel, after all. He joins us on the phone from Queens. Joel Weber, he joins us from Massachusetts. All right, JW, set this up for us.
So I think Max has been really just one of these watchers of Silicon Valley for years, and he spoke up about this one because Palantir has been a really interesting company and one that Business Week has covered more than once. And you know, he reminded us that there's a direct listing coming because this has been a company that's been privately held, and now it will become public just around the corner. But in the process of sort of, you know, its walk up to its direct listing, it's opting to go public via direct listing rather than an IPO. It's also a little ironic because of the company's sort of anti-Silicon Valley stance that it's also taken. And that kind of also speaks to, you know, the company's a little bit of its heritage because obviously it's, you know, Peter Thiel backed. So Max, talk to us about what Palantir, its business looks like and why it's so relevant in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really interesting. It's been, as you say, it's been around for a long time, 17 years. The company, most people probably don't know much about it. If they do know about it, they know it's vaguely controversial. It's vaguely sort of wrapped up with intelligence work. The company was founded by Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist, founder of PayPal, after 9/11, and was famously used by the CIA, you know, during that period. I mean, what's pretty interesting here, besides all the sort of hot button issues, is you have this company that, when you look at its financials, look not especially great. I mean, you know, it's losing hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's been around for 17 years. That's kind of the skeptical case. The more positive case that you hear from investors, from the company, is that COVID and kind of the way that COVID has shifted the economy has been, you know, a really big boon to Palantir in a couple of different ways. It's led to new contracts. Obviously, Palantir has all these, you know, relationships in government, so they have a contract with the HHS, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's worth like $21 million. They've been doing a lot of sort of government work, and it's dramatically changed the numbers. I mean, in other words, their cost structure, because in the past, Palantir, the big knock on this company is that, hey, it's not a tech company. It's actually a sort of a consulting company. They're flying people all over the world to sell their products and to set up these sort of software, these sort of big, expensive software engagements, and that's super expensive. And you've seen their sort of costs go way down over the last 6 months or so.
You know, what's interesting, Max, there's a couple things that really jump out for me. First of all, I mean, this is a company that has thrived, as you say, your words, under President Trump. It's also a company, though, and we get critical of companies, and tech companies in particular, that's controlled by a trifecta.
Yeah, this is another one of these kind of, you know, founder-controlled arrangements, and it shouldn't be surprising because Peter Thiel was involved in the original kind of founder-controlled arrangement, which is the one that Mark Zuckerberg enjoys, and which is really the model for all this stuff. I mean, he started a venture capital firm called Founders Fund that's basically all about this. So no surprise, but the structure is pretty weird. I mean, you have these three co-founders. They own a special class of share. It's in a trust. That trust controls 50%. There's probably some additional stock owned by Thiel and these guys on top of that, plus a board that is, I'm not sure what the legal sort of definition of independence is, but these are a lot of people with close relationships with Thiel and the founding team. So there's sort of a lot of questions on independence. Anyone who's buying into this company is not going to expect to have a huge amount of input. And Palantir's sort of being straight up with that and saying, this is a situation, take it or leave it, which we've seen from Silicon Valley, a lot over the last 15 years. And it's mostly worked out, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So, we'll see once the listing happens.
I think that's a really important and fascinating element of this. It's that, the way that this company is going public is untraditional. It's opting for a direct listing over the IPO. But then on top of it, it's like there's this wedge that the company is opting to put between itself and its potential shareholders. And the shareholders, sure, you get shares in the company, and things, to Max's earlier point, like on paper, this company has been around for a while, but also hasn't had great financials. So, what is in it for investors kind of maybe remains to be determined here, since there could be very little oversight. But Max, that brings me to the other thing I want to say, which is, while other tech companies in particular have used similar kind of share class arrangements, one thing that's interesting about Palantir is, back to the headline, the bad mouthing of Silicon Valley. What's that about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing this a lot in, just across the economy, honestly, but where there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and around the 2020 election, and Palantir, obviously that has a huge bearing on Palantir's future, because Palantir has these gigantic contracts with the U.S. government. U.S. government is currently controlled by President Trump, who has close relationships with Thiel and other members of the sort of Palantir team, and so what's happening is Palantir about a year ago was getting hit really hard by protests over work it was doing for ICE, basically, providing software systems for the U.S. Immigration authorities. That led to protests, and this is kind of the way they've decided to play it. Whereas a lot of these other companies have tried to sort of, work with their employees, or, basically, bend to their employees, wishes. Palantir is taking a different road, which is much more like, no, this is what we're doing. You can take it or leave it. You can have a good faith disagreement, but we do business with the U.S. government, and this is the U.S. government right now, which is, obviously a position that's probably, more popular with conservatives than with liberals, and Silicon Valley is full of liberals. So I think we're sort of seeing a bit of a political play, right, where they declaring themselves allied in some sense with moderates and conservatives at the expense of liberals.
Fascinating, and all eyes will be on Palantir next week with that direct listing. Thank you so much. Max Chafkin, you're the best. Great to hear your voice. Features editor for Bloomberg Businessweek, joining us from Queens. Joel Weber, the editor of the magazine, he joined us from Massachusetts. Well, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Businessweek continues right here. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business, that is coming up next. Carol?
Peter Thiel, Palantir. It's just interesting, right? Like, just how he's doing
Founders
it.
Fund, you think about the PayPal Mafia, like all of that. I mean, it's been one of the most consistently fascinating threads to pull in Silicon Valley because, as Max pointed out, it is both of the valley and not. This is Bloomberg.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday, September 18th. It is a down Friday, on track for another losing week, 3 in a row. Right now, we've got tech shares pushing stocks to a 6-week low as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. S&P down for a third day after fluctuating between gains and losses. Red on the screen now with the S&P down 40. That is a drop of 1.2%. The Dow is down 250, down 0.9%, while NASDAQ is down 144, down 1.3%. 10 years down 1/32 right now with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.4%, 19.51 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude little changed, 41.05 a barrel, up by 0.2%. A Bloomberg radio and television exclusive this morning. You might have heard our Michael McKee speaking with Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic, and in an interview we asked him about interpreting economic data amid the coronavirus crisis and what to make of all those numbers.
The pandemic is something we've never seen before. This is a historic type of event. And if you look at the inflation numbers, there's a lot of noise in there. So month to month and quarter to quarter, the elements of a CPI, for example, are showing wide swings and much wider swings than you would ordinarily see. So it's hard to know exactly what signal we're seeing right now.
The U.S. has moved to expel the Chinese-owned WeChat and TikTok apps from U.S. app stores as of Sunday, while reserving the right to reverse a ban on TikTok's video streaming service once it can hammer out a deal to satisfy national security concerns. Sources say TikTok owner ByteDance is getting more confident its envisioned alliance with Oracle will pass muster with Chinese regulators. Oracle lower now by 0.6%. Tesla higher after analysts at Piper Sandler and Wedbush raised their price targets on the stock ahead of the automaker's Battery Day event next week. Tesla shares, they're pushing higher now, up by 4.4%. Again, recapping, equities are lower across the board. A down Friday with the S&P slumping 40 points, down 1.2%. The Dow's down 0.9%, NASDAQ down 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, time to do a little Business Week economics, and you just heard a little bit of the big interview this morning that our own Michael McKee, you frequently hear the dulcet sounds of his voice on this radio program. He did catch up with Atlanta President Raphael Bostic down in the ATL earlier. Michael McKee was in New York, of course, because it's a remote world. But Raphael Bostic, of course, runs the Federal Reserve Bank down there, and he said Congress needs to provide additional fiscal support for the U.S. economy. That economy obviously has lost momentum. Let's take a listen to what he has to say before we get into a conversation with our in-house expert. Check it out.
What I would tell a policymaker is, look, there are lots of sectors where there's still a lot of pain and disruption that's going on. There are a lot of families who have a significant amount of uncertainty, and those things will wear on our psyche and our ability to grow. So I would encourage them to think about ways that they might provide support to help those who are in more precarious positions not have to struggle and worry.
Right. Provide some more aid for those who really need it. Of course, that's Mike McKee of Bloomberg. His interview with Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic. Let's get into this and what our Yelena Shaletyeva has to say, senior U.S. economist at Bloomberg Economics, joining us on the phone from Long Island. This for our segment of Business Week Economics on this Friday. So, Yelena, I mean, man, I feel like everybody agrees we need some more aid. We need some more federal assistance because of the impact of the virus. Your thoughts on what Bostic had to say and how you see it? I know we've talked about this before.
Sure, but basically he is saying the same thing a lot of Federal Reserve members have already told us, including Chair Powell, is that, well, it has to do with the expiration of the $600 add-on to benefits, to jobless claims benefits that expired at the end of July, and the $300 add-on that was a result of the executive orders signed by President Trump in the beginning of August, they have also expired. So now the most vulnerable layer of the population does not get those extra benefits. And these are the people who actually spend more of their income than the rest of the population. So what happened is that people who have higher propensity to consume are in a much worse position right now. And we will see the impact of this, expiration of extra income on consumer spending.
Right.
We will not see that in the third quarter. We will see it in the fourth quarter and going into next year. And that's why we need this extra support from fiscal authorities.
And yet, what if we don't get it?
So what's the worst case scenario that we're facing, or likely scenario if we don't get it? It's a great question, Jason.
So, excellent question indeed. So our estimates indicate that the impact of that would be in the order of several percentage points of GDP. So if you think about it in the context of a 28% rebound in the third quarter that we are projecting, well, that's not a big deal. But if you think about it in terms of potential growth or average growth over the last several years of roughly 2 to 3%, if you subtract 5% from growth in the fourth quarter, you may end up with negative growth. So our projection is for a very slow growth in the fourth quarter, and we'll see what happens in the first quarter. If things get worse, we may see negative growth again.
St. Louis Fed President Jim Bullard also making some comments. He's, quote, optimistic that the U.S. can get growth all the way back. Are you as optimistic? I mean, I guess, yeah, anything can happen. It just depends how long it takes to get there, right, Yelena?
Absolutely agree with you, Carol. We will get there. The question is when. And, the fiscal package is just needed because that will help us to get there faster. So the longer we wait, the more permanent these losses in economic momentum will become. So it's not going to be just about the pandemic, but it will be more of losses in income, in growth overall, just simply because this is a recession.
And so what's the next sort of most important data point that we're going to get? Obviously, the higher frequency data we've come to rely on, Yelena, when it comes to jobless claims. We heard retail sales earlier this week, I believe. Like, what else are you guys looking for that will help you start to synthesize this latest picture?
So you named those. The next payrolls report, we'll see if we still continue to get positive employment readings. So what happens with the data, and that's a very important point to remember, is that we are entering the season when seasonal factors will become unfavorable to economic growth. So in other words, seasonal factors would expect a pickup in personal consumption because we're approaching the holiday season. As well as seasonal factors will expect more hiring because of this holiday season. So it will be much harder to overcome these expectations for raw economic data to pick up as strongly as needed. So what that means is that we may start getting negative surprises in terms of the data, just simply because this whole thing disrupted seasonal factors to such a degree that it was supporting growth earlier, and now as we end in the final stages of the year, that may start to weigh on economic growth.
All right, Yelena Shalecheva, thank you so much. Really good to catch up with you. Great context, especially given what we've been hearing from the Fed. Was it really just 2 days ago that we heard from Jay Powell?
I know. That's why there was one day this week where I'm like, it is welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is. I really had
It is next Thursday.
No
yeah,
idea.
I mean, it's bananas. All right.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, Yelena Shalecheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics.
And
She joined
listen,
us on the phone from Long Island.
Think about how much we talk about the wealth gap, right? And trying to fix it. Especially this is something that has been such an important topic that we understand, is such a big part of our society, such a big problem. We're just going to forget about fixing that. We're just going to try to make sure people can put food on their table.
Right.
If we don't kind of get this one right. Which
Yeah,
is
looking forward
horrendous.
to, speaking of economics, this is a deep tease or a forward tease. We are going to catch up, I believe, next week with Peter Atwater,
Yes.
right, from
Yes.
William and Mary. And,
Can't wait.
you know, he is the economist, very smart, who has put forth this notion of the K-shaped recovery. I feel like I talk about the K-shaped recovery just about every day now. I mean, I find ways to enter it into the conversation, even from a personal perspective, in terms of like understanding our own consumption patterns versus other people's, and you know, and candidly, like seeing it as a lens for different companies and different activities and different regions and all those different things. It's really critical.
Well, isn't it crazy? Because for so long we were like, is it the Nike swoosh? Is it
Right.
a U? Is it a V? Is it a W? Is it a what? And then when Peter came out and he talked about the K-shaped recovery, it was like, snap.
Yeah.
That explains so much because we agreed. We know people. We have been very lucky that our lives have not changed too much. There are others who their lives have been turned completely upside down and they don't know what their future looks like.
And also, I think the notion of a K that, you know, when you think about it, and the fact that those two lines on the side of the K, they are widening. You know, they are, one's going
I thought
down.
you were
and-
explaining us, you know, mansplaining what a K looks like.
Well, no, but I think it's not an
No,
E.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not stable. It's getting worse. And I think the idea that it's getting worse is really important. All right, let's get to Washington now and President Trump.
Put an end to the restrictions and some of the things that go on and have to go on in the meantime. Today I want to discuss the historic progress we're making to deliver a safe and effective vaccine in record time. And there's never been anything like this ever in our history. There's never been in history, period, world history. Since January, America's brilliant doctors and scientists have been working around the clock. These are the best medical minds in the world by far, and the vaccines are going through the gold standard of clinical trials and very heavy emphasis placed on safety. 3 vaccines are already in the final stage. Joe Biden's anti-vaccine theories are putting a lot of lives at risk, and they're only doing it for political reasons. It's very foolish. It's part of their war to try and discredit the vaccine now that they know that we essentially have it. We'll be announcing it fairly soon. As part of Operation Warp Speed, my administration's manufacturing all of the most promising vaccines in advance. And actually, it'll be fairly long in advance. As soon as a vaccine is approved, the administration will deliver it to the American people immediately. Distribution will begin within 24 hours after notice, and the general, I think those are the words specifically you wanted us to use. Yes, within 24 hours, you're all set to go, and massive amounts will be delivered through our great military, and the general is one of our best, and he is ready to go. We'll have manufactured at least 100 million vaccine doses before the end of the year, and likely much more than that. Hundreds of millions of doses will be available every month, and we expect to have enough vaccines for every American by April. And again, I'll say that even at that later stage, the delivery will go as fast as it comes. They can deliver. They're very good. Best, I think, probably the best in the world. The estimates I'm providing today are based on the manufacturing that's in process, and that's in process immediately right now. We've already exceeded our ambitious goals under the Defense Production Act contracts that we've secured. We may even get far above these numbers. The numbers that I'm telling you today, I think we'll exceed them very, very substantially. And I think that also includes distribution. I think distribution will go even quicker than most people think. I'm relying on our military. Everything I've done with our military has worked out very well. In a short time, we'll have a safe and effective vaccine, and we'll defeat the virus. Interestingly, as I was saying, that go very well, just like what we did with our military with respect to ISIS went very well, long ahead of schedule. They have been incredible in working with me. Let's go to Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico's been hit very, very hard by a lot of different storms, and they're great people. It's a great place. I know it well. Great place. Today, my administration's making the largest emergency relief award in history to rebuild Puerto Rico's electrical grid and educational system. We're awarding $13 billion to permanently repair and replace thousands of miles of transmission and distribution lines that should have been done many years ago. This was beyond even the storms. This was just age and a lot of the salt. The salt from that ocean is a killer for electrical stations and power generation systems. But on top of the salt, you had these massive storms or hurricanes come in. And Maria in particular was a disaster.
All right, and you've been listening to President Trump hold a press conference there at the White House, talking there about Puerto Rico and some of the natural disasters and others that have befallen that island. And we will continue to monitor headlines coming out of the president's comments. We heard a little bit about vaccines, a prediction that we heard earlier, Carol, about 100 million vaccines by the end of the year. Operation Warp Speed, we have candidly gotten some conflicting messages, I think, from the administration, some of the scientists versus some of the politicians, and a lot of reporting around what different folks are saying in different parts of the government.
Well, as we know from our conversation with Dr. Ian Lustbader, you know, this whole idea that there'll be enough vaccines for all Americans by April. Like, we do wonder, what vaccine will that be? Will it be the first of a series of vaccines? I mean, this is a lot of moving parts to getting us back to normal. Let's get a check on some of your top business stories, another check on that trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet. 45 minutes to go here.
Indeed, 45 minutes ago, we heard the president talking about vaccine. Just wanted to check a number of vaccine makers just to see if there was any significant moves while the president was talking. There were not. AstraZeneca's ADR is up 0.9%. BioNTech, for example, down 0.5%. Pfizer is lower now by 0.2%. Technology shares pushing stocks to a 6-week low as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. Red on the screen, lower across the board. Off our session lows for the day, with the S&P down 38 right now, a drop of 1.1%. NASDAQ is down 135, down 1.2%. Dow Industrials down 232, a drop there of 0.8%. 10-year yield 0.69%. Gold is up 0.4%, 19.51 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.1%, 40.92 a barrel. Recapping, equities lower, S&P down 38, down 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Masser here with you, and let's do a little Bloomberg Green.
We are, indeed, and it's brought to you by PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. Join the pursuit of outperformance at PGIM. Learn more at pgim.com. That's pgim.com. So speaking of Bloomberg Green, in our weekly segment, we want to get into California burning. We know that, right? We've all seen those horrific pictures. But why does it seem like forests are lighting up and igniting more often, I should say? Those words are actually from our Bloomberg News sustainable editor, Eric Roston. He writes about it on the Bloomberg and at Bloomberg.com. He joins us now on the phone from Montclair, New Jersey. Yeah, I mean, the images, the frequency, right? We've all been kind of blown away by it, Eric, but why is it happening?
There's a couple of reasons why it's happening. First of all, thank you very much for having me on again. It's always a treat. You could almost think about it in two ways. There's Northern California, and there's Southern California, and there's different factors at play in the return of the fires in each place. The northern part of California, which is highly forested and mountainous, has been subject over the last century or so to forest management practice that suppressed natural fires from happening. And that means that over the decades, an enormous amount of what the fire scientists call fuel, which we would call dry wood, has been building up. And so when something ignites, like lightning, as happened last month, you can really see things take off. In Southern California, which has seen enormous population growth in recent decades, the fires are mostly human-caused. And you see big fires down there around this time of year from human causes when westerly winds pick up those fires and then blow them all over the place. Unifying both north and south are the rising temperatures extended droughts and different precipitation regimes we see from climate change.
So, Eric, we don't have to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I mean, this whole forest management piece, I mean, we've heard the president talk about it. We've heard other people sort of debate kind of whose job that is and where the responsibility lies. I mean, I feel like a lot of people, when they heard the president say, listen, a lot of leaves and it's catching, he's not wrong about that. But whose job is it ultimately to make sure that, as you say, fuel isn't there?
It's if I had the answer to that, I would have an audience of people in Washington, I imagine. I do not have the answer to that.
Yeah. But the fact that no one knows is kind of an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it might just be the way you structured the question, but like I think the way you put the question, like there's no answer. Like
yeah.
There's never been a situation where we have compounded decades of forest suppression coupled with dramatic climate change, and because of how extreme the situation is, there's no existing authorities or precedents that we can point to and say, oh, well, they did it last time. Why don't they just pick it up again?
Right.
I think we need, real live, real data-driven policymaking at local, state, and federal levels in order to reduce the risk we have.
Eric, what about limitations on population and development?
That's a very important question, and like many important questions, it's a very contentious question. Yeah. You'll remember after the terrible fires in out west in 2017, 2018, particularly the loss of the town of Paradise, California, which sort of became a symbol of all these tragedies. There's real discussions over, do we build back? Are homes insurable? Should we be building in what's called the wildland-urban interface? These are questions that could be handled in a lot of different ways, from proactive policy, which is difficult and often unpopular. But if that fails, you run the risk of it being dealt with through tragedy, and people realizing that the fires will keep returning, and it's not, people may feel less safe living there after a certain point.
Right.
And so what are the other, I guess, lessons that we're learning here? I mean, I'm really glad to hear you explain the difference between what's going on in the north and what's going on in the south, because I think in many people's minds who are outside of California, we sort of conflate the two and just sort of like, oh, wildfires in California and the Pacific Northwest. What have we learned about the management, even from a short-term perspective, and really trying to tamp this down, as it were?
There's once everything is often in running, it's obviously much harder than to prevent it. One thing that's very exciting, and that we've been talking a lot about this week at the Bloomberg Green Ideas Festival, is the role that satellites and remote sensing has had in ongoing awareness of risk and of fire management itself. We had the CEO and founder, Will Marshall of Planet Labs on earlier, and he talked about how just in the last week, his company, in collaboration with a few other companies and philanthropies, launched something called the California Forest Observatory, which is as close as you can get to real-time satellite monitoring of not only a live fire, but like where the vegetation is in the path of the fire, so that from space, basically, fire managers can see what's happening on the ground and try to get ahead of it. So everything from like new technology tools like that to, just sort of good old-fashioned controlled burning, at regular intervals on a rational, well-funded policy basis. Everything needs everything that there's a lot of things that can help.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool idea. I know there's a great write-through on the Bloomberg, so folks, check it out if you want to hear a little bit more about that. Eric Roston, thank you so much. We look forward to these segments. Have a great weekend. Eric Roston, sustainability editor at Bloomberg News, on the phone from Montclair, New Jersey. I mean, man, California West Coast, between virus, between the fires, between droughts, between, you name it, thing after thing, Jason. They've got a lot on their plate, and you do wonder, how they get control of it.
Right, absolutely, and let's not forget, depending on the estimate you look at, this is either the fifth or seventh largest economy in the world.
Yeah, so
ahead of many, many, many countries.
Yeah,
California is, so it's vital to our nation. It's vital to the world. You think about it, and the climate issues really illustrate this. The different geographies and how much that contributes to so much economically and socially and population-wise, and, by the way, electorally as well, because we are on the eve of an election. Much more ahead. Stick with us, including the chart of the day. It's Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up,
yes,
chart of the day,
yes,
Friday edition. I'm guessing it's not another Tom Petty.
Celebration.
Oh boy,
that was really bad.
Let's get to the song of the day as soon
Cool
as we
in the
possibly
Gang.
can.
We love Cool in the Gang.
I think most of us got that. Most of us got that. What
I'm
you were
really
trying
sorry.
To do.
That is certainly not one
sorry,
of my
listeners. Sorry, nation. Sorry, world. Sorry, internet. All right, let's get to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on that red trade. Hey, Charlie.
All right, well, hello there. Can I weigh in? We're going down, down, down. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all slumping here with 28 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. 6-week low if you're keeping track. We're keeping track. We're Bloomberg. S&P down 30, a drop there of 0.9%. The Dow's down 168, a drop there of 0.6%. NASDAQ down 106. That is a drop right now of 1%. Investors searching for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. Right now, the 10-year yield, 0.69%. Gold up 0.4%. 19.51 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2% right now, 41.04 a barrel. Bottom line here, S&P 500 index down for a third day. Shares of Oracle, they are declining now, down 0.5%. U.S. moving to expel the Chinese-owned WeChat and TikTok apps from U.S. app stores as of Sunday, while reserving the right to reverse a ban on TikTok's video streaming service once it can hammer out a deal to satisfy national security concerns. Sources say TikTok owner ByteDance is getting more confident its envisioned alliance with Oracle will pass muster with China's regulators, a critical step in the political clash over the popular video app. Again, Oracle shares, they're lower now by 0.6%. MasterCard is encouraging its staff to begin returning to its New York area offices, joining other large employers seeking to bring workers back after months at home. MasterCard shares down 0.9%. 3:33 on Wall Street. Time now for the Small Business Report. Here he is, John Tucker.
Since 1979, Grandy Oats has been producing 100% organic granolas, trail mixes, roasted nuts, and hot cereal in northern Maine. The first quarter of 2020 was the best that this small business ever had in terms of revenue and profitability. And then the pandemic hit. Grandy Oats co-owner Aaron Anker is joining us. You guys were flying high, and describe what happened next.
We were on our way to the largest natural products trade show in the country, called Expo West. You prepare for it for, months, 6 months, and the trade show gets canceled. And from then it just kind of spirals. You lose about 30 grand on the trade show. The 100 plus colleges that we serve throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic start closing, and so you've got all the distributors that are canceling.
Okay, so how did you respond? How did you pivot?
We found some different subscription box companies out there that have been really flourishing during the pandemic, where you basically get your fruits and vegetables delivered to your door, and then you can add on other pantry items like granola.
You are also fighting the perception that just touching the package, consumers could get the virus.
Yeah, I don't know how many people that were washing their groceries. My mom was washing her groceries. Everybody was. And the reality is, the science is saying that it doesn't really live on surfaces. So I feel like really what we need is a full-on PR educational effort from our country.
Did you have to let anybody go?
So we just decided to go with what we knew. We furloughed about 16 people, and as of now, we've brought almost all of them back.
All right, Grandy Oats co-owner Aaron Anker, and that's the Small Business Report.
And we thank you, John Tucker. Again, recapping S&P down 33, down 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
So, are you experienced? Have you ever been experienced? Well,
all right, Carol, jump in.
Is this,
He's arguably the most famous guitar player maybe in the world ever.
Oh, Jimi Hendrix? It's
Yep.
Jimi Hendrix, yeah.
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Boy, that's not a popular one, though, is it?
Title song of his first album.
Oh, that's really cool, actually. That's great, history.
Backwards guitar, absolutely.
On a day when we're going to check out and talk to the founder of the Rock and Roll Fantasy
Camp.
it's really kind of cool to have that song.
Well done, Dave Wilson.
It's
Are
the
you
50th
experienced?
anniversary of Jimi Hendrix's death.
Wow. 50 years. Wow.
Jason
Incredible.
Kelly, don't you feel old?
Seems like just yesterday.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. I know you were talking about Kool and the Gang earlier. Did you realize one of their founding members died last week?
No, I did not know that.
Ronald Bell, yeah,
wow.
at the age of 68. His brother, Robert, was Kool of Kool and the Gang.
I love it. That's just like just a happy song.
Please don't sing it again.
I won't sing it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Come on, Dave.
I
what
think
do
we
you
got a window into like a Masser family wedding there.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. All right.
Oh.
Dave Wilson, talk about the chart.
Let's talk about the chart. It's all about, shall we say, financial fortresses. Companies that are in really good shape when you look at their financial statements. And I bring this up because I ran across this chart yesterday that Liz Ann Saunders at Charles Schwab posted on Twitter, and I kind of turned it on its head. She was focusing on how companies that haven't done so well in terms of their finances were relatively weak. You can turn that around and focus in on the stronger companies. There are Goldman Sachs indexes that track 50 companies in the S&P 500 that have some of the strongest balance sheets, and then there's a separate one for 50 companies whose balance sheets are relatively weak. And when you run a ratio between those two indexes, you find out that it's risen, because the stronger companies have been in favor, to the highest level since March 2009. And if you follow stock market history, that may ring a bell because that was the end of a bear market and the transition into a bull market. So, that kind of got my attention just as sort of a marker. And really, this year, the ratio has been up as much as 42%. And I suppose, though I haven't seen the membership of those indexes. Goldman Sachs kind of keeps it kind of close to the vest. You have to figure that the ones with the stronger balance sheets are a lot of the big tech companies, the kinds we talk about all the time, just because they generate so much cash and whatnot. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Fortress. I like it, Dave.
Who doesn't
thanks for the
dance
Jimmy.
to Celebration at a wedding? Come on.
Everyone does.
I know. It's like We Are Family celebration. It's like, okay, all right.
Electric slide.
Yeah, we'll play 2 more
Gotta do it.
songs, and then you guys got to go home.
Yeah, exactly. Have they cut the cake yet? I'm always waiting for them to cut the cake so I can peace out. I'm so lame.
Peace out because you get one cake?
Yeah, because you can't. It's not polite to leave until they cut the cake.
Oh my God. You leave early?
Yeah. Have we met?
Family weddings, you leave early?
Yeah.
Oh my God. We don't. We love, family weddings are just,
I know. You go big.
we go
You go
big.
Yeah.
It's a blast.
I mean, I have other members of my family who go big, but I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
Really? Immediate family weddings?
Not immediate family weddings. Not if I'm in the wedding.
Boy, I hope Jason's
maybe
relatives aren't listening to this one.
Sure they are. All right, let's get some world and national news headlines. For that, we go to Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. While President Trump is sounding hopeful, a deal could be salvaged for an American company to take over TikTok probably before the election.
I think it could go quickly. We have great companies talking to us about it. You know about Oracle. You know Microsoft has been involved, and let's see whether or not they're continuing to be involved. Walmart is truly a great company. They're very much involved. They want to do something. So we have some great options, and maybe we can keep a lot of people happy, but have the security that we need. We have to have the total security from China.
The White House says both apps, the WeChat and TikTok app, pose threats due to the vast information that they collect on U.S. users. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the failure to reach an agreement on a new round of stimulus rests with Republicans.
The ball is in their court, and we wait for them to come to the table. But our members stand ready to be here for the American people. And the American people are hurting. We represent them.
Pelosi tells Bloomberg the sticking point continues to be over funding to state and local governments. She says the reason there is still unspent CARES Act money is because it came with too many strings attached. Control of the Senate appears to be in play this November. A New York Times Siena College poll asked likely voters in Arizona, Maine, and North Carolina about their Senate preferences, and incumbent Republicans trailed by at least 5 percentage points. Senate Republicans currently have a 53-member majority, so the loss of 3 senators could be the difference. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, the cover story in the magazine this week, Carol, it's all about Facebook. A great cover, great inside art. The art department
disturbing
really
cover.
outdoing themselves. Yeah, disturbing cover, and then a pretty clever inside art job leading into this story that's all about Facebook and the role that it's playing as we get into the election. A related story is one of the most read on the Bloomberg today. Facebook, and we heard a little bit about this earlier in the program, accused of watching Instagram users through cameras. This is creepy.
Oh, totally. And so apparently there were some reports, media reports back in July that Instagram appeared to be accessing iPhone cameras even when they weren't actively being used. Now, Facebook denied the reports. They blamed a bug. They said it was correcting it for triggering what it described as false notifications that Instagram was accessing iPhone cameras. Does that mean it happened or it didn't happen? It happened.
Yeah.
It happened.
Feels like it happened.
Listen, I got to tell you, everybody makes fun of me. As a matter of fact, I can't block my camera because I want to see you right now. But of stickies all over the cameras on all of at least my laptops that I use, that when I don't need it, I cover it up. And but I do think about all of these things that can pick up on our visual, our voice cues, and I do wonder if there's a visual cue that they're able to see.
Yeah.
It gets a little creepy.
Well, and think about how much we are relying on our cameras in our on our phones and on our laptops right now.
Huge.
Massive. I mean, I have 2 laptops pointing at me right now. One where I know the camera's on because, as you say, I can see you and vice versa.
Yeah.
But, got another laptop here as well. So.
Yeah, got my phone right here. It's camera. I don't ever block that camera, or barely. So it's
looking at my phone.
It's welcome to our new world order. This is part of it. Remember the hype that we talked about?
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. 13 minutes until we wrap up a losing week for the U.S. stock market. 3 in a row. We've got tech shares pushing stocks to a 6-week low as investors look for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. The S&P is down 32 now. That's a drop of 1%. The Dow is down 182, down 0.6%, and NASDAQ is down 106, a drop of 1%. 10 years down 230 seconds, yield now 0.69%. Gold up 0.3%, 19.50 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, little change, down 2 cents, $40.95 a barrel. It was, however, a winning week, big week for oil, up by roughly 10%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive. Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everyone, time for the Drive to the Close. George Schulte is with us, founder of Schulte Asset Management, based in Rye Brook, New York, and that's where we find him on this Friday. George, nice to have you here with Jason and myself. Happy Friday. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Good to be back, Carol. How are you?
Doing okay. It was kind of a hefty lift this week between M&A activity, some market pullback, just a lot going on, Fed meeting. So tell us about, kind of how you see the outlook. I mean, you specialize in distressed and event-driven situations. So how does the distressed world, first of all, look to you? And when it comes to event-driven situations, you had a lot with all that M&A this week.
Yeah, the distressed world has been pretty busy. There's been a lot of activity, especially in the energy space. And, there's just been so much leverage out there that's now getting restructured. A big catalyst, of course, has been COVID and the slowdown in the economy due to all the, quarantines. So there's been a lot of activity, but I would say energy is sort of ground zero for distressed land these days.
And what is the M&A activity? Because we had sort of a merger Monday like we haven't had in quite some time this week. What does it tell you? And is it representative, I guess, of what you're seeing out there in terms of the broader deal landscape?
I think the deal landscape, Jason, is very good right now. The outlook is for a continuing recovery from the COVID, pandemic days and crisis. Powell this week said he's going to, basically hold interest rates down, at super low levels for possibly 2 to 3 years. So companies have access to capital, and there's an opportunity for them to merge. There's a lot of stuff going on in different industries. There's a lot of reasons for merging, whether it's cost savings or growth. But we would certainly expect that to continue.
Well, it's interesting you said, so energy is ground zero for distress today. What kind of energy are you looking at and want to be investing in?
So there's a lot of that opportunity, I would say, in the oil patch as well as the natural gas patch. In terms of energy, both those sectors had really sold off, and the overall energy space just has sort of a disproportionate amount of high yield and junk rated debt. And so now you're seeing a mad dash to the courthouse for all sorts of restructurings. And I think coming out of that, there'll be a lot of interesting opportunities with companies at extremely low valuations.
So you are in the midst of participating in one of our favorite things to talk about here in 2020. Blank check companies. You got a SPAC. Yeah. You're one of the cool kids doing this. Tell us about it. Tell us about your acquisition in particular. I love the name, Clever Leaves.
Yeah, Clever Leaves is a disruptive business. We like it a lot, and it's our selected SPAC target. We looked at dozens of different companies, and we found this one to be the best one for our SPAC. It's got a great management team, and its business plan is really to disrupt the whole cannabis industry with super low cost production, a global footprint. It's really exciting, and we're looking forward to seeing this merger close into the fourth quarter of this year. The company will be listed on NASDAQ. And, I think the outlook for it in terms of market share, penetration with, exceedingly low costs is excellent.
And so, why are SPACs so hot? I mean, literally, and I'm not taking anything away from you, but it's like we have joked, like, dude, everybody's got a SPAC. I mean, Baron Davis, the two-time NBA All-Star, we have news on him doing a SPAC today. Billy Beane from Moneyball fame. Like, what is it about this particular method and methodology, I guess, of getting something public or making an acquisition, more to the point, is so attractive right now?
Yeah. SPACs fit a void, Jason. I mean, they really offer investors a combination of equity upside potential if the right deal is found, the right company like Cleverleaves, as well as downside protection for an investor who wants liquidity and is frustrated with, exceedingly low interest rates, which have been low for so long. That's why SPACs are popular. It fits both of those requirements. Downside protection that you get in the fixed income market. A SPAC trust, the cash in the SPAC trust sits in a trust and, is invested in treasuries, and there's your downside protection. Then when and if a good deal is found, you can vote on it and get equity upside like we're looking to get and deliver to our shareholders with Cleverleaves. If the sponsor or management team fails, the good news for the investor is that they can still walk away and get par plus accrued interest, even though it's a low rate of interest. So that's why they're popular, and we think they'll continue to be popular. The proof, though, is, how good the acquisitions are and how good the management teams are and the companies that you bring to market, because basically you're bringing, a private company to market. What we found here with Cleverleaves is just, it's phenomenal.
Well, why is it phenomenal? Because forgive me and my skepticism, but, in terms of the cannabis market, we've seen the boom, we've seen the bust. Trying to figure out where we are, we have had a fair amount of CEOs on, and some certainly seem to be stronger players, no doubt about it, getting bigger in the marketplace. And some of the smaller players, especially in the consumer side, consumer product side, we see some come out strong and then they fold. So I'm just curious, what is it about, this one that you says, okay, it's a go?
It's a go, again, because of the management team, but really because of the business plan behind it as well. It's exceedingly low-cost production model. They produce at about 20 cents a gram. Mm-hmm. By the way, they're just a legal cannabis producer, so they sell cannabis only for the medicinal market in markets where it's legal. So they actually don't sell in the U.S. But you have the optionality for expansion into the U.S. when and if that market opens as well. But I think the lower cost production element of it is so important because it's disruptive, and because of that, they're taking away market share and even getting some of their competitors to give them significant business, like Canopy Growth recently did.
Right. Is it, though, your expectation this is a takeout play once it goes public? Just got about 40 seconds here.
Yeah, I'm not projecting that just as of yet, Carol. I think once it goes public, it's an execution story, and the projections are conservative, but outstanding. So we're going to let this management team do their work, and potentially there'll be some M&A activity in the future. We don't know, but for now, they're going to keep growing this business and really proving themselves as public company operators.
Yeah, it's interesting. We never know sort of what side a company might be on, especially in this business, this cannabis business, that's for sure. Well, congrats on that. Really good to catch up with you. George Schultze is the founder of Schultze Asset Management, also a part of the special purpose acquisition company, Cleverleaves. Love the name.
Well, very cool name, and I just think about 7 Cents Botanical Therapy. It was CDB Body and Skincare. We've had their CEO on. I've tried their products, loved it. They shut down during the virus, and now I don't know that they're bankrupt, but they're not operating.
Yeah.
And so I'm just saying it can be a tough go. But again, he's in the medicinal, so and where it's legal, and that's certainly a different business model. Stick around, folks. We've got the closing bell right here on Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Turned out to be a losing day, losing week. 3 in a row for the U.S. stock market. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all declining on this Friday, September 18th. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. It's on to the weekend. Technology shares push stocks to a 6-week low as investors search for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. The dollar strengthened. Treasuries little changed. S&P 500 index down for a third day after fluctuating between gains and losses. Here are the closing numbers. We had the S&P 500 index falling 37 points today, lower by 1.1%. Dow Industrials down 244 points. That was a drop of 0.9%. NASDAQ was down 116, a drop there of 1.1%. So it was a down day across the board. 10-year yield 0.69%. Gold up 0.3% at $19.50 the ounce. Crude oil surging 10% this week. Today, though, a losing session. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, $40.90 a barrel. Well, as for the backdrop for mergers and acquisitions, George Schulte is founder of Schulte Asset Management. He was our guest moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
The outlook is for a continuing recovery from the COVID pandemic days and crisis. Powell this week said he's going to basically hold interest rates down at super low levels for possibly 2 to 3 years. So companies have access to capital, and there's an opportunity for them to merge.
It was a tough day for a lot of tech names. As I mentioned, we had the NASDAQ Composite Index down 1.1% today. Apple shares slumping 3.2%. Microsoft was lower by 1.2%. Facebook shares down by 0.9%. Tesla shares up 4.4%. Analysts at Piper Sandler and Wedbush raised their price targets on the stock ahead of the automaker's Battery Day event next week. Recapping stocks lower. S&P down 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Wild thing, think you move me. I got a few moves I know you'll like. Shake it, blue thing, shake it, blue thing, yeah, yeah.
Oh, come on, shake him, not stir.
Just move on up toward your destination.
I can make things move without touching them.
Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and Shakers with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, time to take a look at some of the stocks on the move, give you some of the big picture for that Friday trade. Of course, Charlie breaking down the closing numbers on Wall Street, all for highs and lows of the session, but down. And the S&P 500, most names in the index, it's pretty much a broad-based sell-off today. 413 names in the index, lower today, 90 higher, 2 unchanged. If I look at those major industry groups, the best performing group, Jason, healthcare, but still down just a touch. Call it flat on the day. Financials down about 0.2%. Bottom of the pack, utilities down 1.8%. Real estate down about 2%. And if we look at the numbers for the week overall, we're either flat or a little bit lower. Call it flat on the Dow for the week, and down about 0.6% on the S&P 500, down about 0.6% on the NASDAQ as well.
Yeah, an interesting day and candidly an interesting week. I feel like as this is a market that's trying to find its footing, I think, especially ahead of the election. A lot more Fed speak this week between Jay Powell and
it's like everybody came back to work, I felt like, this week.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Last week we didn't know where it was going to go. And look, we've got some crosswinds, I guess, cross currents, if you will, when you think about the virus and sort of opening and closing. And, even in our little world of Wall Street, people are like, hey, let's get everybody back. It's like, oh, traders go home because we've had a case. Traders go home because we've had a case.
Yeah. Start and stops is what you said.
London.
It's a really great way of describing. Like, we, for such a long time, we talked about living these 2-week increments. We still do to a certain extent, but now it's kind of stop-start. Okay, wait, things are getting back to normal. Well, no, wait, it's not.
Yeah. So I did want to mention Tesla. It's a name that we were looking at earlier, and in part because of our pal, Kathy Wood. Tesla up about 4.4%. Today, closing at 442. Now, for those of you who think, oh, wow, it hasn't gained that much, it did a 4-for-1 stock split.
It did a 4-for-1. I know, exactly.
Was it a 4-for-1 or a 5-for-1? I'm going to look it up while
Is
you
this
talk
like
about
the
Kathy
Bloomberg
Wood.
News quiz, and you're just going to like trip me up?
It is 4 for 1.
Okay, 4 for 1. So what's great too is there was a story on the Bloomberg among the most read in the past 60 minutes, and how we got about 82 billion shaved from its value in just one day. The record plunge that we saw in Tesla recently. Kathy Wood, her innovation ETF was dragged down big time as a result of it, but perfect reason to buy even more. Here's her quote: "I was happy to see it get slapped." Quote, "We wait for those sorts of days where there is outright fear. If we think the stock has dropped enough, we'll move in," and we did. And it plunged earlier this month about 21% after missing out after being included in the S&P 500. This has been though her playbook. This is what she does. She believes in her conviction. She believes in her names, and when there's a pullback, it's usually an opportunity to kind of double down on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's shown in her performance.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt. And Matt Winkler had a recent column about her not too long ago.
Oh, you know what? I think it was actually just checking. It was a 5 for 1 stock split.
Oh, it was 5 for 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
See, it's the Bloomberg quiz. It's going to be like, is it 3 for 1, 4 for 1,
4 for 1, or 5 for 1, and then now I'm going to get it right because you set me straight. Looking at a couple of the cruise lines going down. Listen. That has been a tough trade. You know it better than anyone from the company's perspective. You sat down with the Carnival CEO. There's a big story in the magazine this week, and actually you can listen to that story this weekend on our podcast, Part 3. Matt Campbell joined us earlier in the week talking about what went on with Carnival in Australia.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. And what's interesting is, as we go through this virus and understanding how everybody reacted to it, there are a lot of responsibilities, corporate responsibility, regulators. And again, I know we didn't have the playbook, but, hopefully we've created one so that we don't create the situations that we had to all live and endure this year.
And the pressure today on both Carnival and Norwegian is owing to, some of these outbreaks that we're seeing in Europe, which is obviously a big market for them as well. Let's do the VIX. Volatility down a bit, about 1.6%, closing at 26.05. It's Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the doors, Dave! Who? Dave!
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Mr. Wilson, thank you for keeping us honest on that Tesla stock split. What you got for your stock?
I've got Veritone, Jason. It's a maker of software that uses artificial intelligence to analyze data. The company's main product is a self-described operating system called AIware. Other programs are aimed at advertisers, media companies, and police departments. Veritone was founded in 2014 and went public in 2017 at $15 a share. The ticker is the first 4 letters of the name, VERI. Now, Veritone shares have been volatile this year. In March, they fell to a record low of $1.22. In the next 3 months, they rose more than 16-fold. Then they gave back most of the gain. The past 2 days brought another reversal. Veritone rose yesterday by 8% after winning 2 subcontracts from the U.S. Air Force. The awards involved using AIware to process images taken from planes. Veritone's subcontracts only totaled $1.3 million, yet Northland Securities raised the possibility today that there may be a bigger phase, as they put it, ahead for the company. Northland recommends buying the stock, and many investors were doing just that. Veritone rose another 15.5%, and that was the stock's biggest gain in more than 2 months.
Whoa.
There you go.
Right.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you
Have a
so
great
much. Hope you're
weekend.
going to spend some fun vinyl over the weekend. Looking forward to all your insights next week, and especially those songs. Good week of songs. Little Tom Petty, little Jimi Hendrix.
A little more Tom Petty.
Curating
Exactly.
it really lovely.
Yeah, exactly. Can't
Right?
wait for the September list. It'll be coming out before too long, right, Dave?
Right? And the next week, because I'm off the following week.
What are
There
you
you
doing?
go.
What are you doing?
Still figuring it out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if you
There
need
you
some
go.
advice or some ideas, just come to us. We have
Carol's
some
got,
ideas.
Carol's full of ideas. All right, Dave
We
Wilson,
Sam.
thank you so much. Let's get to Ed Baxter now. I'm sorry, let's get to Denise Pellegrini. Hi, Denise.
Hey, Jason and Carol, how are you guys doing? Well, France's finance minister has just tweeted that he has tested positive for COVID-19. Now, the finance minister saying in this tweet he has no COVID symptoms. The country today, though, had 13,000 positive COVID tests. That's the most since lockdowns first began there. President Trump speaking out today about the fight over control of TikTok, saying a deal between TikTok's Chinese owner ByteDance and U.S. companies could be coming.
I think it could go quickly. We have great companies talking to us about it. You know about Oracle. You know Microsoft has been involved, and let's see whether or not they're continuing to be involved. Walmart is truly a great company. They're very much involved. They want to do something. So we have some great options, and maybe we can keep a lot of people happy, but have the security that we need. We have to have the total security from China.
In the meantime, the U.S. is moving to expel TikTok along with WeChat from the U.S. The apps coming down from U.S. app stores on Sunday as of right now. Joe Biden on the campaign trail today on a tour of a union training center in Minnesota and talking about infrastructure.
We rank 27 or 28 in the world in infrastructure, yet we have the best capacity of anybody. And so this is the stuff that's going to put a lot of people to work.
And the Trump administration is opening an investigation into racial bias at Princeton University. The Education Department calls the school's recent acknowledgement of racism shocking and an admission of discrimination.
Denise, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, this is a topic that we've talked a lot about on this program, and I think we're going to keep talking about it because I think it's important. Voter turnout. We've heard a lot about celebrities, athletes, and others making real strides to not just educate people, but to take specific action, whether that's opening sports venues or concert venues, things like that. Corporate America, though, doing their part, trying to do their part. This, according to a piece in the Washington Post, talks about Uber, Best Buy, and others, things that they can do to encourage their employees, really, to get out and vote.
This is so cool. And the specifics in it. Uber exploring offering some of its national network of green light hubs. These are facilities where ample parking, where its drivers go to troubleshoot issues and offering them up as polling places. Live Nation Entertainment said this week that 5 of its concert venues are confirmed or in the final vetting stages as polling locations. Best Buy planning to delay opening its roughly 1,000 U.S. stores by a couple of hours on Election Day to give employees the opportunity to vote. Under Armour planning to expand paid time off for voting from 2 to 3 hours while discouraging meetings or deadlines for November 3rd. I gotta love this. I just do. This is great.
Remove the obstacles. Don't give people an excuse not to vote. I mean, and not that people are necessarily looking for excuses, but listen, if you've got to work, and especially if you're anticipating that because of pandemic and because of just big turnout, this is a really important election, that there are going to be long lines. You can't say, all right, I can just squeeze it in at lunch, or, oh, I can go right before work. Not if you're going to wait 2 or 3 hours. You need time.
I'm a determined voter, right? But I'll tell you how many times I've just...
I think you could just say I'm determined. I think that covers it all.
But
voter,
cannot sing,
host, singer, dancer,
yeah,
sailor.
right, exactly. And this from a shy girl. That's how I grew up. But I mean, what's interesting is, I just sometimes get it in under, just as the polls are closing. So...
Also checks out.
It does.
This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Another losing week for the U.S. stock market. 3 in a row this week. The S&P down 0.6%. 6-week low. Investors searching for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. Today, a down Friday. S&P fell 37 points, down 1.1%. The Dow dropped 244 points, down 0.9%. NASDAQ down 116, lower by 1.1%. 10-year down 1/32 with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.4% at $19.51 the ounce, and crude down 0.3%. Winning week there, big week in fact for crude, up 10% this week. Barrel of crude now at $40.84. Talking about West Texas Intermediate. Recapping stocks lower. S&P down 37, a drop of 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much. You are listening
That
to
was a
Bloomberg
family wedding
Business
picture I was just showing you, and we were kind of a bunch of us ladies holding up one of my cousins.
100% checks out. There is no doubt that a master wedding is, a lot of cool in the gang, a lot of electric slide, and open bar. All right, let's talk about Washington a little bit. Party animal, Nancy Pelosi. She's the House Speaker. She talked to David Weston earlier, and she said the duration of the stopgap funding measure still undecided. Hopes to have the government funding bill by today. That is today, Friday, so it can get a floor vote early next week. Here's what she had to say to David Weston.
Now we're just working out the details, but we hope to have it today so that we can bring it to the floor early next week and then go to the Senate, which usually takes a little bit longer in terms of their process, so that by the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th, there'll be no question that government will be open.
And that is House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, of course, speaking earlier with David Weston on balance of power. You can find that full interview at Bloomberg.com. Carol?
All right, so let's get a little bit more about this and the outlook for more federal stimulus, if you will. Let's bring in Billy House. He is congressional reporter at Bloomberg News, and he joins us on the phone from the nation's capital. Hey, so Billy, I don't know, where are we in this process? And you know what's really fascinating to me? Josh Green had a great story, too, that's like, there's an election, and you would think the Republicans would be much more aggressive about getting something big out there and done before the election.
You would, but from their view, they believe they have. They passed their narrower bill, and they are trying to portray Nancy Pelosi and Democrats as trying to sneak in a bunch of Democratic favorite items instead of actually addressing the stimulus. So that's their spin, but neither side is bending, and so as of today, we have no agreement, and we may not, and both sides saber-rattling that there might not be one.
And so when it comes to the president, Billy, it feels like there were at least reports from you and your colleagues and elsewhere that he himself, as he tends to do, not always in lockstep with some of the folks that are working for him, seemed to be moving closer to Pelosi and the Democrats. Was that sort of a feint? Like, what's going on when it comes to the president who's never predictable, to say the least?
Yeah, he's... So where we're at is that Pelosi and Democrats have said they won't go below $2.2 trillion. At one point, McConnell said maybe $1 trillion, but their skinny bill was a lot less than that. The president has suggested, kind of indicated that 1.5 would be okay with him. But for Pelosi and Democrats, their view is they've already come down a trillion from their original bill 4 months ago, and they aren't going to go down any further. And that the needs have grown, including now the airline's saying that they're going to have to lay off a lot of people at the end of this month.
Yeah, I wonder if, it's interesting. I do wonder the lobbying efforts that are going on right now, right? We know those corporations have deeper pockets than most, and I do wonder what might result out of that. I mean, what are you hearing, Billy?
Well, we don't know. We know for instance, on the airline executives, they just got off a virtual call with Pelosi about an hour and a half ago. So they are certainly full court press on, hey, well, whatever you do, you got to include us. There is that suspicion. You're right that big business as opposed to small business is is kind of seizing the day to get stuff they don't really need, and that's of course the Democratic line. So,
yeah, and I mean, you do think about this from just a sort of pocketbook perspective, and sort of to finish up where we started, Billy, where Carol started with you, this notion that we are, pretty close to an election here, an election that obviously is for president, but also so many down ballot races, and folks having to go back and at least virtually campaign and facing constituents who, from a personal perspective and to your point, a small business perspective, really continue to be hurting in a pandemic that may be abating a little bit, but we're all bracing for a second wave. So many variables, it feels like, and nothing really happening.
Well, you're right, and it's kind of funny that you're seeing, for particularly the moderates on both sides, the swing district people panicking in both parties, including upstate there in New York. John Katko in the Syracuse area, he's among those desperate for the House to do something, the House Republicans to go along, and Senate Republicans to do something. Meanwhile, Pelosi has people in her own Democratic caucus, especially first-term centrists, saying, we can't go home saying we did something in May,
right?
And the Republicans won't do it. We got to do something more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think about. It's pretty remarkable in an election year, and so much is contingent on how people feel about their lawmakers, right? Or the folks in Congress or the administration in the White House, how they're feeling. Billy, so you do wonder if something will happen in the 11th hour, and is that too late then?
Yeah, I don't think so, and I think that's a possibility. But at the same time, Pelosi's throwing some kind of fake, we're going to stay here till we get it done stuff, when really, members aren't here. They're on 24-hour notice, and they went through their August recess not being here, but they're on 24-hour notice, so that's it.
All right. Billy House, thank you so much. Great reporting. We know you and your team will be all over it, every twist and turn, and it's been twisting and turning for quite some time. I mean, weeks really stretching into months when you think about where we were, because July 31st, that was a while ago at this point when a lot of those benefits expired.
And if you're not getting a check, that's it. What do you do if you're
right.
an individual or, a family, and that's it, and you don't have a job and the money's not coming through? I don't know. It's just kind of baffling. All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. For those of you listening in New York and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on Bloomberg 99.1 in D.C., Sound On with Kevin Cirilli is coming up next. Coming up next, we're going to hear from the Alphabet CFO, Ruth Porritt. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to hear from David Rubenstein, the latest episode. Ruth Porat, of course, CFO of Alphabet. Carol?
Yeah, we are indeed. Let's get a check, though, on your top business stories, some of the news after the close. Let's check in with Charlie Pillett, who's the nicest guy around. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check my Twitter feed and what Charlie did responding to a comic, kind of making fun of him, imitating him. I don't know. What do you say, Charlie? You are the sweetest guy around.
It is done with much love. Let me get right to the business. A lot going on. Another loss for U.S. markets. 3 in a row with the S&P down this week by 0.6% today, losing Friday. Quadruple witching with the S&P down today by 1.1%, lower by 37 points, 33.19. The Dow down 244 points, down 0.9%. NASDAQ down 116, a drop of 1.1%. 10-year down 132nd with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.4%, 19.51 the ounce. And crude lower by 0.2%, 40.88 a barrel. Tech shares pushing stocks to a 6-week low. Investors searching for new catalysts to give direction to global markets. The U.S. will ban some transactions over the Chinese-owned WeChat app while prohibiting new downloads and updates of the app, as well as TikTok's app beginning Sunday. You got to stay with Bloomberg Radio right through the weekend to find out how all of this plays out. Dan Ives is an analyst with Wedbush Securities. He was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television.
I mean, this is a credible threat. Major shot across the bow at ByteDance, TikTok, and of course, the government in China. It all comes down to they need to be willing to accept majority U.S. ownership, which is a work on Walmart likely, as well as the source code situation in terms of access. That continues to be the big issue here.
He mentioned Oracle. Its shares lower today, part of a broader tech sell-off. Oracle down by 0.7%. Recapping, S&P down 37, a drop of 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, this David Rubenstein peer-to-peer preview, it is brought to you by Wells Fargo Commercial Banking, helping customers chart the way ahead in uncertain times. And Alphabet Inc. CFO Ruth Porat recently sat down with David. In this excerpt, she talks about her employees working from home, how the nature of work will inevitably change because of the pandemic.
When you started working remotely, did you ever worry it would be a problem because you have all these people, but you're technically very savvy?
So when we started the move to work from home, it did seem daunting. I'm responsible for our crisis response and put together a really strong governance around how do we get people to move from home with a global team and then a regional team, and we were in sync daily. That worked really well. What we were most concerned about was what would be the impact on productivity and wellness. Our chief medical officer, very early in the crisis, said that more people would be affected by mental health issues than actually the physical disease itself. So we focused on those two, and I think that was really important. The other thing is Google is really about our people and the ability to deliver for users and communities because of our compute capacity. And one of the things we didn't have to worry about was our ability to really deal with the surge in online activity. And that was because of all of the investments over many years and all of the testing for what could happen in a sort of crisis scenario. And I think it's an important point because you can't solve the risk management issue in the middle of a crisis. You obviously need to solve it ahead of time, and that worked.
So many companies are saying, well, now that I've learned that my people can work from home, maybe I don't need all these people either in the office or I don't need all these people. Is that your view? You don't need all the people you have, or you may not need them all in the office?
We believe that when people are together, that's a critical element for innovation. Collaboration helps support innovation. It's collaboration within teams, and it's collaboration across teams. It's collaboration and it's serendipity. So we do look forward to having people back in the office. What we're looking at is the productivity lift you get if people have the ability to work from home some days, be in the office, in particular when the rest of their team or more broadly teams are in the office. And if you can save people commute time, you have better access to talent because you're solving what people want in their personal life, it's actually going to result in a better outcome. What that means for real estate, we're still figuring out.
Early on, Google was well known for, among other things, you got free food. What about if you're working at home? Do you give them free food showing up by delivery somehow, or how do they compensate for that?
So we're not doing that, but a lot of people focus on food when really what we are trying to create, have been trying to create, is this fun, quirky, magical campus. And so it's about more than just the free food, it's the experience on campus. So what we did when we moved everybody to home is we moved a lot of these sort of connecting the community to a virtual delivery. And so for food, as an example, you can do a one-on-one session with a chef, you can do a cooking class. We took our fitness classes and moved them to virtual fitness classes, and even some sort of goofy Google-style ones like yoga with your dog.
Count
Yoga
me
with your
in.
dog.
Oh my God, yoga with Scout?
Oh my God.
Scout would be like, nah, I'm
She
good.
does a mean downward-facing dog.
Alice does a really good downward-facing dog.
Well, those kids are like rubber, man, right?
I
They
know.
just they bend and they just.
I
I
know.
love little kids in yoga.
Yeah,
Love it.
it's cute. Scout, I think, couldn't be bothered.
I've
yoga.
actually tried to do yoga with her around. Like, I have these yoga instructors, including my favorite, that I've studied with, Jillian, for over 20 years. And she'll teach classes online with her dog lying down in the back. Sunday, her dog in the back. And there's another one out on the West Coast in Oregon. Her dog's always just sleeping and occasionally gets up, maybe
Yeah.
changes. But
Yeah.
Scout is underneath me and forget it.
Right, yeah, just kind of getting in the way.
Yeah.
And then being, and then can't be bothered. And then,
And then
needs
it's
to
scratch.
hunt.
Can I get out? Can I get
Yeah,
out?
and
Yeah,
then
I'm
needs to
sorry
hunt-
that you're
hunt a squirrel.
in Shavasana, but I got to go outside and get the squirrel
Yeah,
or the skunk that we're
exactly.
still dealing with.
Yeah, corpse pose really changes when a dog is licking your face. In any case, you can listen to that entire interview, Yoga with Dogs, food delivery, but also, a more serious conversation about innovation and how you accomplish it, how you sustain a culture. If you've ever seen the movie The Internship, which if you haven't seen is one of the funniest
It's De Niro,
rewatchable
isn't it?
movies. No, that's The Intern.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
The Internship is when Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, as grown adult men, get internships at Google. It is hilarious. Anytime you hear me say "on the line," that's where that movie is from.
Oh, okay.
It is.
You guys in your movies, man.
It is really a terrific movie, but
Yeah.
they had Google's full cooperation, and so they filmed on campus, and you get a sense of exactly what she's talking about, that, people talk about the free food, but it really is about sort of creating this culture and all these different things.
We have it in our place. People come in and visit, and they're like, man, your culture, you feel it the minute you walk in.
Totally.
You get it. And it's great to have a company that has such a clear identity, and we all benefit from it in terms of how we work and what we get done, which is why.
And how do you sustain it virtually? That is
not
one
so
of the big
easy.
challenges we're all facing, that's for sure. So
I do miss the running into people in the food court.
I thought you were going to say, I do miss running into the studio right before the show is about to start.
Yeah, that
sort of
happens
going
too.
toward your voting.
I do that at
anecdote
home, though.
from
It's
earlier.
like, get out of my way.
Yeah.
Come on.
So I'm coming down the stairs.
Scout, come on.
That entire interview, David Rubenstein and Ruth Borat, tonight at 10 p.m. Wall Street time, throughout the weekend on Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, we got several cool interviews that we're going to get to, Kara.
Back to back. So looking forward to that. Right now, though, back to World and National News headlines. Back on over to Denise Pellegrini. Hi, Denise.
Hey, Jason and Carol. Well, the CDC is changing its mind again on COVID testing, and health officials now say people in close contact with someone who tested positive should themselves get tested. And that was its policy until last month. It suddenly dropped the guidance. President Trump today, meantime, saying the U.S. is accomplishing a lot in its fight against the virus.
Hundreds of millions of doses will be available every month, and we expect to have enough vaccines for every American by April.
In France, the finance minister tweeting he has tested positive for the virus, but also says he's symptom-free. He'll be in quarantine for a week. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey touring some of the aftermath of Hurricane Sally in her state today. She says things are really bad, and here's Ivey at Gulf State Park in Gulf Shores.
Slow-moving Sally is probably the slowest moving storm with the greatest impact that anybody's ever seen.
And hundreds of thousands of people are still without power in Alabama. A firefighter has died battling a wildfire in California. This is that fire in San Bernardino Forest that officials say was started by a couple using a pyrotechnic device as part of a gender reveal ceremony. And here in New York, grab your goggles and your swimsuit again. Mayor de Blasio announcing the city's public and private indoor pools can open again. This will be at 33% capacity starting September 30th. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Denise, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, this would make for a different sort of weekend.
Can I just say, like, now we go into a different portion of our show.
Yes. This is teasing ahead maybe to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, putting the fantasy in Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
Yes, indeed. We're talking about magic mushrooms, but it's really kind of cool. There's a company called Compass Pathways. It's a UK company, and they've patented a synthetic version of the active ingredient in so-called magic mushrooms. The goal is to use this in treatment-resistant depression. We know those folks who suffer deep depression and depressive disorder. I mean, a lot of times treatments don't work. They're not effective. So perhaps magic mushrooms are an alternative treatment that can help these individuals. So anyway, they're going to go public. $14 to $16 a share each, right? This is next Friday, right? This wasn't this Friday. This is next Friday. So this would value the company at just under $600 million. Peter Thiel, talked about him earlier.
Yeah.
Apparently he is one of the backers.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is a fascinating area of research, and if you haven't read it, I'm not sure we've
If you
ever
haven't
talked about
tried
it,
it, that's what I thought you were going to say.
If you haven't read the book,
Bum.
How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan, terrific book. Of course, Michael Pollan, the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma. He did a book, I believe it came out last year or the year before, and it's all about psychedelics and their history and where they fit in treatment and science. It's really, really well done. And, from a medical perspective, from a regulatory perspective, there is a fascinating history and twists and turns. And when you start to think about, psilocybin, and then you look at it alongside some of the other Schedule I drugs and how they've sort of been all lumped into the same category, there's some fascinating research, and obviously there's some economics behind it too.
Speaking of research, they're looking to do more R&D and clinical trials, as well as to develop digital technologies to pair with the Compass therapies, which is really kind of a cool connection there. All right, this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Another development in the WeChat TikTok saga. iPhone users are rushing to install messaging app WeChat days before President Trump is set to ban downloads in the country. WeChat downloads surged to make it the 100th most downloaded app in the U.S. today. According to mobile analytics firm Sensor Tower, it has typically ranked between 1,000th and 1,500th so far this year. Apple shares lower today by 3.2%, part of a broader technology sell-off. Tech stocks pushing U.S. markets to a 6-week low as investors search for new catalysts to give direction. S&P down 37, a drop of 1.1%. NASDAQ down 116, down 1.1%. The Dow down 244, down 0.9%. 10-year down 2/32 with a yield of 0.69%. Gold up 0.3%, 19.50 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, 40.89 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, recently they have put out a challenge, really an imperative and an ask as we are coming just up on that presidential election. Their ask, in their words, it's simple. It is an imperative. Ensure climate is a core pillar of all 2020 presidential debates. Let's hear more from Joey Bergstein, who is the CEO at Seventh Generation. He joins us on the phone from Burlington, Vermont. Joey, it is great to have you here with Jason and myself. We want to talk about this ask that you guys have made, but we've got to ask how you guys are doing getting through the virus and, personally, professionally, how is your world?
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for having this conversation and digging deeper in on this important issue.
Yeah.
We're in a really interesting place. We're obviously working really hard to meet the public need for safe cleaning and hygiene products. And so we've got a big team of people who are working really hard to try to get safe and effective cleaning and hygiene products out to the public. So it's been an interesting period of 6 months. But we're responding well and I think doing well overall, and turning our attention now to saying, how do we really mobilize the country to take the action that we need to address climate? It's one of the biggest issues that are in front of us, and real action needs to be taken.
So, Joey, let's talk about that because, we're talking to you at the end of a week where across the Bloomberg empire, as it were, and Carol and I were both involved in our Green Festival, where we've been talking about so many of these issues. And I do think that what came across in so many of our conversations, I know it came across in the conversations I and Carol had, was this sense of urgency, and a sense of urgency that feels like has only been accelerated or deepened by the pandemic in many ways. And also a sense of urgency because there is something that we can do about it insofar as it is an election year. It's a presidential election year, but also a number of different down ballot races for ultimately politicians who can affect policy here. How should we be talking about it? How should the candidates be talking about it in a way that's meaningful and not candidly just rhetorical?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I mean, look, the science is clear. We're dealing with climate change. 2020 is on course to be the hottest year on record, at which point all of the 10 warmest years ever recorded will have occurred since 2005. We're seeing the effects broadly every single day. And right now, it's really clear that we need to take action. The scientists are in agreement that we need to limit the temperature rises to less than 1.5 degrees by 2030, which gives us less than 10 years to take meaningful action. And I think at this point in time, and this was the point of the letter that we published, we need to understand where the candidates stand on this issue. How are they going to lead us through this crisis and enable us to stand up to what's in front of us in a really meaningful way? And I agree. This is an issue up and down the ballot. It's a city issue. It's a statewide issue. it's a national issue. We need to concentrate on taking action at every level of government.
And I'm going to say, and I mean this in a really nice way, you know, hands down, you are preaching to the choir when it comes to Jason and myself. We feel really strongly about this. And I know we do as an institution just look at our, you know, Bloomberg Green vertical in terms of putting out, you know, it's science, it's statistics, it's not opinion. But I do wonder, how do you sway public opinion so that they care enough that their political candidates are talking about these issues? Because that's what really, I feel like, ultimately matters too.
Absolutely. And what I'm reassured by the fact that 70% of Americans do understand the science. They do understand that climate change is real. And the job right now is to get people to act on that understanding and to take action now, to understand where candidates stand on the issue and what they're going to do, because we all have the ability to to affect meaningful change if we use our voice as citizens at the polls.
What would you want the candidates to answer specifically? Do the debate for us. And I wish, you know, in general, the debates that they were limited to talking about the issues and not saying why they don't like everybody else or their, you know, their opponent. But what would you ask up on the debate stage?
You know, there's three issues I really love for them to speak to. One is, how do we transition our economy to clean energy by 2030? That is going to be the single most important way we can affect the greenhouse gas issue that's in front of us. So what's the policy that we're going to put in place to be able to move to clean energy? The second issue is we're in the midst of a combination of a racial justice crisis, a economic crisis in the middle of this pandemic, and the climate crisis. And we're going to need to invest in infrastructure to address a lot of the issues that are in front of us. How do we move to make the right investments in clean energy, clean water, so that as we invest in infrastructure to help manage us through this crisis, we emerge in a stronger, healthier place than we were coming into the crisis? And then the third thing is really that we know that people of color are the most impacted by pollution, by the impact of climate. And how do we ensure that we disproportionately help those communities that need the help? And my questions would be against those three areas. What are we going to do differently to get us to a different place? Because the same policies or regressive policies aren't going to get us to a safe and healthy place. And we know you can't live a healthy life on a sick planet.
Right.
We need to take care of our planet. We need to take care of our people.
And the planet has
a human health issue.
No borders, right? What we do impacts others, and what China does impacts us, and vice versa, and all around the world.
And so Joey, to that extent, just before we let you go, only got about a minute left here. I mean, one of the things I think we admire about what you've done is you understand the economics of this. You understand the economics of sort of you know, the sorts of products and services and the economic structure that comes with this. Give us one lesson that you've taken from your role as a company and running this company that could be applicable as we think about this.
Sure. Well, one of the things I'm so proud about with Seventh Generation is that as a company, we take real accountability for the impact that we have on the world. You know, we're not perfect. We're far from perfect, and we know that we can always be better. But
okay, ladies and gentlemen, time's up for today. Let's sum up this week, how much we earned this week. We did okay, not bad. On Monday, we made £900. On Wednesday, £1,000. On Thursday, £500. And on Friday, £500 also. Today, total £2,900. All of you guys who followed my trades and made a profit, well done. Don't spend all your money. And I wish you all the best on the weekend. Have a great one. Stay safe. And I'll speak to you all on Monday next week. Anybody who wants to purchase the strategy, you know where to find us. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, CEO of Seventh Generation. This is Bloomberg.